Good morning, everyone. I'm Peter Balte, Chair of the Palo Alto Architecture Review Board. Before we start our meeting, I'd like to read a brief statement. Pursuant to the California Governor's Executive Order N-2920, this meeting will be held by virtual teleconference only with no physical location. Spoken comments via a computer will be accepted through the Zoom teleconference meeting. To address the board, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 974-7551-5801. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, click on Raise Hand. When called, please limit your remarks to the time limit allotted. Spoken public comments using a smartphone will also be accepted through the Zoom mobile application. To offer comments using a regular phone, call 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 974-7551-5801. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, hit *9 on your phone so we know that you wish to speak. Okay, with that, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Balte.
Present.
Board Member Hirsch.
Present.
Board Member Lee.
Present.
Board Member Liu.
Present.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Thank you.
First item, I'm just trying to pull up the agenda here. Do we have?
Yeah, so the next item would be the oral communications.
Very good. Thank you, Jody, very much. Oral communications. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak to any item that's not on our agenda today? Vin, do we have any phone calls, any hands raised?
We had one, but they just lowered their hand, so they must be here for Castellea and not oral communications.
Okay, so everybody out there will be hearing testimony on the Castellea project as we hear that project. This is just for any other items that are not on that agenda. Next item is agenda changes, deletions, and additions. Staff, do we have any changes, additions, or deletions?
No changes at this time.
Very well. Next item is city official reports. Jody, do we have anything?
Yes, so good morning. My name is Jody Gerhardt. I'm the manager of current planning, and I think someone's bringing up this report here. So we do show that we are going to be in virtual meetings on Zoom here for the rest of the year, at least. I show that Board Member Lee would be excused on October 15th. And I don't know if there's any other vacations or absences that we're looking at. That would be good to know ahead of time. So please let me know if you have that. And then if we go down a little bit further, you'll see on the 15th, though, is the day that we're going to be discussing the objective standards. And we're going to have, we'll have some more announcements about that at the end of the meeting today. And so Board Member Lee, potentially if you wanted to send in some written comments, that would be wonderful if you're able to do that.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Okay. The next item then is our action items. The first item on that list is the public hearing for 1310 Bryant Street to Castellea School project. This is the second ARB hearing. Architectural review of Castellea School's phased campus redevelopment proposal for site modifications, demolition, construction of a below-grade parking garage and a new classroom building, and minor alterations to one facade of a historic inventory Category 3 building on campus. Redevelopment is associated with a request for conditional use permit, CUP, amendment and variance for gross floor area replacement. Zoning district is R1 10,000. Environmental review, a final environmental impact report was published July 29th, 2020. With that, can we have a staff report, please? I believe Amy French will be doing that.
Yes, good morning. Amy French, Chief Planning Official. I wasn't sure if there were any disclosures that had to happen before I upload the PowerPoint.
Please forgive me. Yes, I'd like to take a step back on that. I bit rusty today. Do we have any staff disclosures on this project? Starting with Alex Liu, any disclosures? Let's skip Alex, then Grace, do you have any, Alex, any disclosures?
We can't hear you, Alex.
You're too quick on the trigger finger.
Okay, how's this?
That's
Yeah,
good.
we can
No
hear you now.
disclosure.
No disclosures from Alex. Ozma, any disclosures?
No disclosures.
Grace Lee, any disclosures?
Disclosures.
David Hirsch, any disclosures?
Nothing new, except I just want to thank Kathy Ladecker, which I didn't do last time, for having taken us on a tour of the Castellea School, which was very important for us. Thank you.
So I will disclose that I visited the campus again and spoke to a groundskeeper who was working at the time, but I did not learn anything that's not in the public record. Okay, with that, Amy, please go ahead.
Okay. Give me a moment to share my screen. Is everyone, oh, here we go. Shoot, excuse me. Is everyone seeing this? Let's see, display settings. I know it takes a bit. Is this working out?
Yeah.
Okay, not sure why
Yes.
it's showing two slides at once, but so be it. Okay. So today's hearing with the Architectural Review Board involves this presentation I'm giving now. Sorry, I'm distracted by this. I don't want to see all these people, including myself. There we go. This is the second Architectural Review Board hearing of this project. This is still new to the ARB. You first saw this back in August. As is typical for our second meetings, the staff report provides on packet pages 11 through 13 a brief summary of the ARB comments that are related to design and the responses. And I included some links in that response table to help folks go to those materials on the webpage. There were other items that the ARB requested information, so I have those today as well for discussion. And then we'll have the applicant present the revisions they submitted back in September. And then we'll have ARB questions and another round of public testimony. And then of course the comments from the ARB. And we request a continuance of the hearing after all of that to the next hearing. And the applicant has committed to bringing forward a conformed plan set that will have all of the changes and all of the relevant sheets for the project alternative. So the comments that ARB mentioned last time were focused on entries, the architecture on the two streets, KELLOGG and BRYANT, and the materials, the circle, the tunnel, landscaping, and the temporary campus, and requests for information, as I mentioned. So we'll let the applicant cover most of these architectural responses. I have a brief overview. This one shows the KELLOGG side drop-off entrance, which is residentially scaled and not a lot of fanfare there. The overview of the changes that were submitted recently are shown in this brief slide. It includes removal of second floor area on the KELLOGG side to address the comment about mass, roof line, and plate height, breaking that up. And there's a enlarged landscape plan that shows some of the details and plant materials for that side, close to the corner of BRYANT. This is an overview. Again, the architect will go over these. This shows this change, the big move change. And the materials were posted at City Hall, showing this revision here with the green tile that is the applicant's preference. The Bryant side has a new feature, which is a ground floor gathering area with a porch on the front side as well as on the back side. And, you know, for comparison, the prior scheme had a fence and an open area here. This shows the porch that helps the public and the ARB understand that there's an enclosed and covered area here. It's an indoor area. And then there's the two outdoor areas, the front porch and the rear porch. There are several options for the front. There's bench seating for this drop-off area. Okay, why isn't this moving? Okay. There we go. This shows the floor plan, first floor and second floor plan, and an indication as to where this floor area is being removed at the second floor area, as well as, again, this ground floor with porches configuration facing Bryant. This shows the kind of secondary entry point next to the gun building here, the historic building, where this is an open kind of garden entrance with fencing to match the Embarcadero brick and iron fencing. And this shows where this new staircase is proposed to enable egress from the second floor of the Bryant building, of the gun building. This kind of shows the kind of garden area where this fenced and gated area lead into. So last week we met with the HRB, who did accept the final EAR responses on the cultural resources. That's the area of their purview. And they also reviewed a draft finding specific to historic preservation, specifically related to the gun building. They requested and will form a subcommittee to review the final detail for this exit stair. They also, reviewed all of these drawings, which I'm not focusing on today for ARB. Again, this is an improvement because the roads building is being removed and a significant space is provided to let us all see the building, the historic building, without this building attachment. This is an image of what it was shown to look like in an illustration from back in the day. Again, the HRB supported this finding, so this is contained in your staff report related to historic preservation. The Planning and Transportation Commission met on September 9th. That was their second meeting. They have a third meeting upcoming in October. The members that were there voted and related to the EIR's sufficiency. And then they asked staff to return with draft findings and conditions for them to consider for the CUP and the gross floor area replacement variance. And we'll let the ARB know the outcome for the ARB's next meeting. The ARB had asked last time, and these were on the web pages. This shows the temporary campus layout. And there were some images of the second floor, the two-story modulars. The ARB, I think the applicant has those images as well. We shared those with the Planning and Transportation Commission, since the CUP covers, use of the site for a temporary campus. This was another piece of the project that can be confusing, and it's about construction phasing. So the applicant's CUP requests milestones and sets a request for an increase of 25 to 27 students per year, and related to these milestones of construction. Trees, there has been some recent activity. In July, the project arborist met with the city arborist on site, and we've received updates to have current day measurements of trees and to understand, are there trees that have died in the meantime, that kind of thing. This list here with the yellow reflects the project alternative, which now protects these redwoods. These are the redwoods that are next to Speaker Field. Again, the applicant will present their proposal for tree disposition. This is just a summary here showing, that's been looked at, which trees are being removed for which of the buildings. So they're removed for driveways and a fire road, for the pool, and for the academic building. Noise was a question. This shows the pool wall facing the neighbor, the section showing how that works, and the this sound wall configuration, the kicker at the top. So this faces the neighborhood on this side, and the pool's down on the other side. The TDM program is complex. There are mitigation measures that would result with monitoring in reduction of the total net daily trips, which is 279 would be added with the project net daily trips. Those would be mitigated to 114 net new trips. The number 1,477 is the total daily trips. That includes the existing trips plus the net new trips. That's been a point of confusion. The city staff are working on conditions that go farther than the mitigation measures, and those will be published with the Planning and Transportation Commission report that is due out soon. So we'll be looking.
Could I interrupt a second and just
Oh,
ask?
I'm almost done. May I just finish?
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Okay, then this is, I think, my final slide related to events. And this just, obviously, we're not going to read these, but the applicant has submitted the events. And so this is the total proposed events. So 45, under 100, 40, that's 100 or more, and then 5 major events, which are down here that is legible, I guess. So that's the proposal. And that's I'm going to conclude here, but I do have other slides if for questions and to when we start, if we start today discussing the architectural review findings. I'm going to try to end my show. Okay.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you very much. Okay, so do we have any questions of staff from any members of the board? Dave Hirsch, I heard you start something.
I do.
Go ahead.
On the daily trips, does that throughout the day, morning, afternoon, night, pickup, delivery, etc.? How does that play out for a particular day, the 1,400 plus?
Well, so, there's 2 ways that trips are measured. So we have PM and AM peak trips. Those are typically analyzed in the environmental impact reports. That in the past has been the method to determine if there was an impact to traffic. That has changed since July of this year. But in any case, daily trips is different than PM and AM peak. So, I'm not a traffic engineer, but this has been thoroughly studied. Daily trips would be the total daily trips throughout the day, all trips.
Okay.
And that's because of the applicant's proposal for an enhanced transportation demand management program that limits the number of trips to the school.
Have they been analyzed in terms of where they occur on the site? Like the amount of trips that will be into the garage or figured into that, and the amount of trips that are on Bryant Street during the different hours. Also, I guess you didn't mention this, and it's not maybe a part of the study right now, but there's going to be a monitoring aspect to that, right? The actual time of morning and evening hours will be monitored by the school in some way.
Well, monitored by the school and the city and a third-party consultant. We have an extensive, and the ARB will be able to see all of these conditions that go on top of the mitigation measures that are in the EIR. You can see the mitigation measures today. on the web pages, the conditions of approval that are draft for the consideration of the Planning Commission, who has the purview of the transportation, that those will go farther than the mitigation measures.
No, actually,
as far as enforcement and all that.
I didn't really mean that kind of monitoring. I meant that they were providing staff to move the traffic at the school in the morning hour, and I think maybe in the evening hour too. Have you any discussion about that? I think they were going to have people at the site and moving traffic and keeping it moving in some way. The school was going to provide people, not monitoring in order to determine the amount of traffic that's coming on any particular day, but to keep the traffic moving.
Yes, that's part of the proposal from the applicant, is to have, the staff is, guiding traffic that comes through the garage, that comes into the other drop-off areas in the morning.
Right. That's right.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't understand it first.
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you, David. Any other questions from other board members? Grace, Alex, Osma? Then I have two questions I'd like to, or maybe two things I'd like to point out or talk about really quickly. Amy, I want to be positive. I think we talked about this last time, but as I understand it, the applicant is requesting a variance for floor area. And the reason we're allowing that, I'm reading through the zoning code carefully, and it says that in the R1 zone, variances are not allowed for limitations on FAR and size of establishment. However, the city is determining that only limitation on floor area, on size of a building, applies to house size. The 6,000 square foot limitation in table 2 in the R1 section of the code just says house size. Is that correct? That's why we're allowing this variance to go forward?
It's deeper than that, or broader than that, maybe. It's, first of all, it's a gross floor area replacement. So there's two sections of the code. There's FAR and there's replacement that's regarding non-conforming or non-complying facilities. So there's two areas of the code that address, this situation. And size of establishment is typically used for, in the code to describe like limitations on personal service size or office size. There's parts of the code that deal with size of establishment. So that's really what that phrase is regarding. And yes, in the R1, the 6,000 is a maximum house size. That doesn't apply to this project because it's not a house. So
that's the fundamental statement I want to be really clear as to the community, and for any fear of setting a precedent is being established here, that we get much pressure from people wanting to go bigger than 6,000 square feet, and that's a real ironclad limitation in Palo Alto, and I'd hate to see us establish a precedent other than that. But you're reassuring me that the reason that a precedent does not apply here is because it's not a house. Is that correct?
Yes, there's many things that apply here because it's not a house. And, certainly a 6-acre parcel in the R1 is a very rare circumstance.
Absolutely. The second thing I'd like to do, I noticed we have Walter Passmore as a panelist. I would like to, after the applicant presentation, I would like to hear Walter's opinion of the impact of the garage on the redwood trees to the west of the project. So just giving him a heads up, Walter, if we could get you promoted to give us your opinion after the applicant makes their presentation. Okay, with that, any other questions? If not, can we have the applicant make a presentation, please? Who do we have from them speaking, Jody?
Oh, we have
Or Amy, whomever.
yeah, I believe, well, we have Mindy, who's the attorney. We have the garage designer here. We have the Pauline and Natalie are the architect team, so they'll have to unmute themselves. Kathy Landecker is representing the school. Okay,
well, the applicant, you have 10 minutes total to present your case. If you'd like to go ahead, we're all ears.
Right.
Please state your name for the record, though.
Absolutely. My name is Adam Woltag, design partner with WRNS Studio, and I'm going to go ahead and make the presentation. I have a bunch of lifelines out to the rest of our crew here, so you can always ask for their input as we move forward. Let me
Ben,
just,
can you be sure we start a timer, please?
I'll keep track of time.
Go ahead, please. Make your presentation.
Great, thank you. The committee asked a lot of fantastic questions at the last time we met. We want to get through all of them. There are 8 sections. I'm going to try to get through them as efficiently as I can, and I look forward to any questions in the Q&A if we want to focus a little bit more on some of these points. This is a slide that just shows the original project campus plan, alternative 4, which is what we're proposing, and I'm going to be speaking to some of the modifications that Amy touched on in her presentation to alternative 4. So the first section, massing and setbacks. So this slide illustrates the existing building footprints to be demolished in orange and proposed in green. As we look a little bit closer, it's key to note that the proposed buildings are sited over the existing classroom buildings, and that the circle, which holds a deep historical meaning and memory to Castellea, has been reduced in size and moved in plan to account for the proposed campus teaching spaces. It's also designed to address the bus drop-off in an efficient and safe way. It's also important to note that the 2 maintenance buildings that sit along the southern property line along Emerson are being removed, increasing that setback to almost 80 feet. This slide illustrates the proposed campus access and security boundary, illustrated in orange. Key to point out that the proposed campus entry is where it is today at the GUNN building. You see that there by a very kind of small red star, but the entrance to campus will remain the same. Now let's move on to the Kellogg elevations and modifications. Now, since we last met, the team has taken your comments and proposed some design modifications to the Kellogg massing and facade and material strategy. This slide shows what we showed you the last time. And please note the drawer of the middle school clad in standing metal seam panels. And now the revised approach. And note that the massing along Kellogg has clearly opened up at the middle school building volume. This adjustment frees up the science classroom building to the left and releases views of the sky, and adding a little more visual interest to that elevation. We are also proposing replacing the metal siding with wood shingles, which is more of a reference, a historical reference to the resources on campus. And that 1-story stitch between the science classroom and the middle school, we are proposing to clad in ceramic tile, green color. Again, another reference back to the GUNN building and its green painted wood details. And this is what it would look like with trees. Not going to see all that much. The trees there are very, very dense. Now this slide illustrates how the facade on both the ground floor and the second floors along the Kellogg elevation is varied, with those dimensions clearly marking the various distances of the facade to the property line. Key to note that great care has been used to incorporate a varied facade that works with the planning of the interior classrooms and how they meet the building face. And here's a comparison slide that shows before and after. Now let's move to the Bryant Street modifications. And in reference to Amy's presentation, she discussed that there are going to be some modifications to the space between the middle school building on the left and the library and arts building on the right. What you see here is what is in the current alternative, which is just kind of an access gate between both buildings, and the revised design that replaces that gate entry with a covered porch, a 1-story covered porch. And that is what it would look like with the existing trees in place and a few new proposed trees. This is a drone view of the proposed existing entry with the gate. And then what we're proposing, the porch entry. So this revision, as we've discussed, provides a covered 1-story secured space between both buildings. And we feel really better defines that Bryant Street elevation. In place of this kind of secondary gate, we like this recessed porch. We think it feels more residential in scale and character, and it offers opportunity to locate the existing beautiful wood doors that are already part of that Bryant Street elevation and been there for 40 years. And here we go, a comparison between both options. Now moving on to material details and craft. And in this section, we wanted to present a more detailed look at our proposed building materials and how they come together. We didn't have to go very far for inspiration. The campus has wonderful architectonic elements that we can draw from and incorporate into the new buildings, pointing out the warmth of the wood shingles of the GUNN and the Chapel Theater buildings, the beautiful green painted, handmade Bryant Street doors we just discussed, and of course the circle. And really the overall kind of palette we feel is one that is simple, it's compressed, it's elegant, and it's natural. And our proposed palette builds from this, taking cues from the way sunlight can play off the texture of wood shingles, of vertical wood siding with wood battens, textured concrete, and then what we like is kind of the craft and color of glazed tile. Here is our exterior material board. And as Amy noted, it is in the reel in the lobby of City Hall. Just want to note that all the buildings are clad in wood shingle and vertical wood siding with accents of glazed fire clay. Aluminum windows and storefront systems will have high performance insulated glazing units that support good acoustics and coordinate with our overall building envelope performance strategy. So looking a bit closer at the application of these materials along the Kellogg Street facade, this is a detailed elevation and plan cut through the high school portion of the building, where we see the second floor. Note here, the cut is right through a setback on the second floor where we have, we're calling it a planted balcony. So on the left, you see the wall section, and on the right, a 3D cutaway. That illustrates how the vertical wood siding rolls under the eave toward the window and past that planter box. An even more detailed wall section that really starts to kind of illustrate how these materials are coming together. Note the concealed gutter, the concealed planter box, the painted metal spandrel panel that delineates a second floor line, helps kind of scale the two-story building, a lot like how the GUNN building delineates wood siding from cement plaster. So moving north along Kellogg, a detailed elevation and plan at the revised middle school drawer, formerly dressed in standing metal seam, now more appropriately clad in wood shingles. And note the green tile to the left on that one-story stitch between the middle school and the science building. Here again, the second story setback of a landscaped edge. And this 3D section brings to light and illustrates one of our daylighting strategies for the lower level. And there'll be more on this a little bit later. And a little more detail, how the wood shingles of the science building now with that second floor opening allow those shingles to move and wrap inward toward campus. And on the right, a proposed detail of how we would like to cap our shingled elevation with a clean metal hemmed edge and not the typical 4-inch cap flashing. We think this approach maximizes the wood shingle surface and gives a nice shadow line cornice to that wall.
2-minute warning.
Oh boy. Moving ahead, we're looking at the Bryant Street elevation and more detailed sections of how that wood siding is coming together. And again, looking at the glass skylights that bring light into that lower level. Daylighting analysis. So this was a slide we showed last time that illustrates in yellow one of the key strategies of trying to bring daylight into the lower level of these new buildings. At the high school hub, we are using skylights and full height storefront window systems that bring daylight in. And we use stairs as a way, open stairways as a way to bring daylight in. We've been studying the sun patterns around campus on the exterior and the interior. And we've done a detailed daylight analysis to test our strategies to make sure we have enough daylight and we're not bringing in too much glare. We have a full-scale mock-up at Sacred Heart Schools where we've tested some of these opportunities. And it's been great to see them and how successful they have been. Moving on to landscape design. This is our current landscape planting plan. Key to note, the bioswales are dispersed throughout campus to help with our stormwater strategy. And our tree disposition plan shows in peach the trees that will be removed and in dark green the trees that will be relocated. Our tree mitigation plan shows in peach where the location of the moved trees will be, and in green, all the new proposed trees to the campus plan. Tree protection plan is shown here. Key to note, that red line where the redwoods abut the below grade parking. We've worked with an arborist and a structural engineer, and we think we have a strategy that will allow us to go below grade and not affect the health of those redwood trees. An enlarged planting plan of the Kellogg and Bryant Street intersection, illustrating the texture of our native planting palette and how they're working to really mitigate stormwater. It is part of an overall strategy where everything is coming together and working together to hit our sustainability goals.
10 minutes is up.
Adam, can you say how much more time do you need, please?
I could probably get through this in a minute and a half.
Good. Take that much, please.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So looking at the garage tunnel entrance, you see that red box indicates where pedestrians will move from the garage up to campus. And this is a section cut from the garage to that stairwell. Just as a point of reference, it's about 30 feet from stair to stair. It's an open stairway, so there'll be daylight coming in. There'll be an elevator, and we're looking at different ways of bringing tile again and color and delight to that lower level. And then looking at the temporary campus when construction is going on. Amy touched on this a little bit earlier. Here is the plan for the temporary classrooms. They'll be 2-story in nature with exterior walkways. This is what they would look like. And these are views from Embarcadero during that period when the classrooms will be on the over the below grade parking. And another view from the Emerson side of Embarcadero. All right. Thank you. Looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll do a round of questions with the applicant, and then we'll open the meeting to public testimony. Do we have any questions from the board to the applicant?
I actually have a question for staff that came up.
Sure, go ahead, Osma.
For the facade that is up against the GUNN building, so the new facade, the modified facade, are we commenting on that as well?
You're welcome to comment on it. I think the purview of the HRB is best suited towards, Secretary of Interior standards, evaluation there, because it is a historic resource on the city's inventory. But certainly comments are welcome, especially if you have concerns about the finding that the HRB weighed in on related to that building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from other board members?
I had a question for either Amy or the applicant, and I apologize if I missed it. I just wanted to make sure about that acoustical wall type 1 and also the fence type 5. I'm wondering if that actually is something that was presented to us at the previous meeting to the of the ARB, and if there's been alternative designs for that acoustical wall.
I'll say that it was part of the package that was it's in the project plans for the project, so it wasn't highlighted. I mean, we had a lot to cover at the first ARB with the EIR. So I think,
and just Amy, if you could just remind me, I believe that this is part of alternative 4, and it's just been the design has been consistent and in the package presented to the city and has not been modified.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
1 second, David. Grace, do you want the applicant to explain how they're doing that sound wall and talk about any possible alternatives?
No, I actually just wanted the history of if there was I couldn't recall if there was another type of acoustical wall that was presented to us, and we were covering a lot of things at the last meeting, and I just wanted to remember.
Great, thank you then. David, your question?
So this is the applicant. Could you describe the number of classrooms that are in the basement area and how the basement is really being used? There's very little description so far about what is happening on that level.
Absolutely. I don't have an exact number of classrooms, but I can tell you, David, there are a number of different types of spaces in that lower level. And those range from the extension of the library, very open and flexible spaces like, gathering and study spaces, There are music spaces, so the loudest things that could be done there are in the basement. So choral and band spaces are down there. There are language classrooms we have there that are gathered around open, flexible, informal gathering spaces. There are meeting spaces. There are some faculty offices in the lower level, as well as a lot of mechanical spaces too. We've really tried to move a lot of the equipment from the rooftop and put those underground as well. We have service spaces down there, and the high school hub space, really important, their main living room, right? Which goes from the ground level. I showed that section a few minutes ago, goes from the ground level down to the lower level. So there's a real variety of types of spaces. They're not all classrooms.
Thank you, Adam. Any other questions? I would then like to have the city arborist comment on the sufficiency of the tree protection measures for the redwood trees adjacent to the parking garage. Is that possible, staff, to have Walter Passmore comment on that, please?
Sure. Walter has returned to work following. So I've provided for him the most recent. We do have some details that are on our webpage showing the soil nail wall. I could possibly pull those up and share those. Walter, I know.
I see Walter listed as a panelist. Is he not available? Yes, I think we.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
Yeah, I'd really like to hear from Walter Passmore if we could, please.
Sure.
His opinion of the sufficiency of the redwood tree protection measures. Can you go ahead, Walter?
Yes, so I have reviewed the latest arborist report. Still need to look at some scale drawings to verify that the measures are completely sufficient, but the appearance right now is that the applicant has provided measures that would protect those redwood trees and allow them to remain in similar condition to what they are right now. The applicant also provided updated measurements, and we noted in our site visit that some of those trees have grown fairly significantly since the last measurement. So thank the applicant for doing that. Like I said, we need scale drawings to confirm with certainty, but it appears that we have provided a design that will protect those redwood trees.
Thank you very much, Arborist Passmore. With that then, no other questions. Why don't we open the meeting up to any members of the public who wish to speak? Vin, do we have anybody who wants to address us on this issue?
Yes, we do have about 10 hands raised right now, and there's more being raised as we speak. So let's get the speaker timer up.
Can you give me an idea of how many people we have? Is 10 people is what you see?
We have 12 people now, and then we'll also write down the names of everyone who has their hand raised in the order they'll be called on.
12 people, okay. So let's stick to our 3 minutes again and start with, you want to call them out, Vin, please, since you're managing the list?
Yes, so it looks like we have 13 hands raised now. So Veronica, if you can update the list after you start the timer for first speaker. Our first speaker will be Tom Shannon.
Go ahead, Tom.
Hello, ARB. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I sent a memo to you folks yesterday, and so I don't know whether or not you had a chance to look at it, but I'm just going to paraphrase some of our concerns here on Kellogg. And I appreciate Adam Woltag's articulation of the Kellogg building. I didn't realize there was so much articulation on that plan that he just put up recently today. So anyway, in my memo, we want to just emphasize that Kellogg is pretty impacted by the school. And so we're trying to buffer those impacts. So sound and noise really make a difference. And we have a break in the Kellogg building right now. And when there's amplified events, we basically get to be, if you will, entertained by those events. Not that they're offensive, but they do leak into the neighborhood. So we would prefer the original design where you have a solid two-story element running down Kellogg. My second bullet was about building articulation. I see that Adam actually nicely presented that, so I'm going to skip that. Then we'd ask the committee to maybe look at varying the architecture. I'm the first to know modern architecture doesn't handle gables and roofs and facades, but certainly would like to hear how you feel about this kind of architecture up against our craftsman homes. Fourth is the solar cells and roof equipment. We just want to make sure that that's completely concealed. I've said in my memo, we would welcome a variance to the roof screen just to ensure that we don't see those cells and equipment from our yards. Then fifth, and probably most important, is an acoustical, consider an aesthetic acoustical fence running along that Kellogg drop-off. I mean, that will have intense drop-off and pickups at least twice a day. And I might also point out that the Kellogg entrance is probably one of the most attractive entrances on campus because people can just park right in front of it on Kellogg and walk in. No offense, but staff has a tendency to use Kellogg first and then the parking lots fill when there's no closer parking. So I just want to highlight that to the ARB, and obviously we'll look at that with the PTC on October 14th. So all that being said, I appreciate your input. And there was a question about traffic, and we don't know what it's going to look like, but you should realize that the traffic for the school is basically what I call a merry-go-round. It can only come in on Bryant, it has to go down Kellogg, and it has to exit either on Emerson, Melville, Kellogg, or Churchill. So there's really no other way to get into this neighborhood. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Barbara Hazlett. You'll have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Barbara Hazlett. I'm a neighbor of Castellea and Pally, and I feel lucky to have two such incredible schools right outside my front door. It is a privilege to speak this morning in support of Castellea as it plans for another century of educating young women to become leaders. Castellea is a treasure, and as Palo Alto voter who strongly supports residentialist goals, I feel that schools, churches, libraries, and community centers are crucial civic elements and enhance our residential neighborhoods. Schools serve the public good and should not be driven away from the students they serve. Specific to this hearing, I want to speak about the temporary campus. I've looked at the structures that Castellea will use for their temporary campus. They bear no resemblance to the trailers we see pop up to create extra space on other campuses. They have wood finishes and colors that blend with the historical buildings on campus. In addition, the school will add a row of potted trees along Embarcadero to form a green barrier between the street and the life of the campus. Immense care and thought has been put into every detail of this process, which is not at all surprising. The school has created a plan that takes every small concern into account and mitigates impacts. At the last hearing, someone raised concerns about whether the temporary campus would be taken down in a timely manner. As Speaker Field is Castellea's only athletic field, I am certain all of those structures will be removed right away because the school needs that field. In fact, the school needs its classrooms remodeled and opened as soon as possible. That is why there is a detailed schedule that allows for construction of the parking facility and learning spaces to be completed in under 3 years, faster than many single-family homes these days. The school has much more invested in finishing this project and clearing the portables away than anyone else. So there's no question in my mind that this will be done in a timely manner. Once again, I want to state that I'm in favor of a residentialist approach, and I know that supporting excellent schools supports healthy neighborhoods. I support Castellea, and in doing so, I want to preserve the Embarcadero corridor, the vitality of my neighborhood, and ensure that inspired architecture and exceptional education continue as foundational and timeless values in Palo Alto. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Kathy Garber? You'll have 3 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the time and care you've put into reviewing Castellea's plans to modernize their campus. As a longtime resident of Palo Alto and as an architect myself, I'm excited to see the updates to the plans for this meeting. Castellea is an important asset to Palo Alto, and I'm eager for the school to gain permission to begin this necessary and long overdue update. I've taken a look at the changes that the Castellea's architects have made to the project, and I wanted to use my time to comment on the improvements that they've made to the BRYANT side of the campus. The first story of the GUNN building now has an enclosed porch space between the library and the language classrooms. This new porch connection, I think, nicely brings together the elements from the GUNN administration building, as well as the KELLOGG facade into the space that joins the two sides of the campus. I like the vertical windows that recall the windows on the chapel theater facade. And I like the suggestion that the architects are making in this presentation to repurpose the carved green doors that have opened onto the Bryant Street for decades. I think that'd be a graceful nod to the past in this lighter, more updated structure. The new one-story connection between the two taller structures also echoes the modifications that is being shown on the KELLOGG side of the campus. This helps to create the continuity between the KELLOGG side and the Bryant Street side of the campus. The palette of the materials and the plantings along the roof line and the recess entry all form a more thoughtful and distinctive entry into the campus than the metal gate that was included in their previous plans. In addition, the small enclosed space will create a more substantial buffer between the campus life and life on the sidewalk outside. In addition to lessening the noise in the neighborhood, I would think it would also provide greater security for the campus too. Overall, I think these changes create a more cohesive and thoughtful relationship between the buildings and the neighborhood. And so in closing, I want to reiterate my respect for the work that has gone into this project. I'm so impressed by all the work that Castellea has done to respond to the feedback and improve their plans. This handsome update allows Castellea the opportunity to modernize, just as schools across Palo Alto have done in recent years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Trisha Suvari. You'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. Thank you to the board members for your time. As a resident of Palo Alto, I want to speak in support of Castellea's thoughtful plans for modernizing campus. I realized that at the last ARB meeting, there was some conversation about why the circle was being maintained at the center of the campus, because that may be limiting options for updating the campus. I want to address the importance of the circle, both to the history and to the future of the school. Historically, this circle is one of the original features of the campus. This outdoor space is as much a touchstone to the past as the GUNN administration building, built in 1907, and the Chapel Theater. The green space that forms Castellea's circle is the beating heart of the campus and has been for the past 113 years. For every student, parent, or visitor who steps on campus, there's an immediate recognition of the value of the circle. It's where friendships are formed, fun and laughter ensues, study groups are held, sports are played, and of course, our countless traditions take place on the circle. There are many things special and unique to Castellea, but the circle is symbolic and very much a part of the school as much as the buildings. With their application, Castellea has found a way to retain the circle for the new campus while reducing its size in order to allow for project site planning benefits. This change not only makes the circle smaller, it also pulls the edges more toward the center of campus, which allows Castellea to draw the buildings closer toward the center of campus, as well as allowing for more space between the building edges and the surrounding streets. Campuses have a baseline percentage of open space, and the circle addresses that in a way that preserves the history of the school, and the buildings which surround the circle serve to buffer the neighborhood from the sights and sounds of daily life in and around the circle. The circle has been a part of Castellea since the beginning, and the modifications to the new plans for the circle going forward benefit the neighborhood and the school. I appreciate your care in reviewing these plans, and I also appreciate that your questions about how to think about improving upon the circle have already been addressed by Castellea. And finally, I want to commend Castellea for taking as much care with the outdoor spaces as the indoor ones. The landscape architects on this project have enhanced the natural world around campus, preserved and added trees, and used drought-tolerant species to conserve water. The structures and the plantings all serve to improve the aesthetics while minimizing impacts on the neighborhood and the environment. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Mary Sylvester. You'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, board members. I am Mary Sylvester, a 43-year resident of Palo Alto, and for that period of time, a neighbor of Castellea School. The focus of my comments today are on how does this project serve the best interests of Palo Alto? First of all, let's set the context. Castellea operates in an R1 residential neighborhood on a conditional use permit. That permit is a privilege, not an entitlement. And no part of the project may be injurious to property in the vicinity, nor may it be detrimental to the public health, general welfare, or convenience of the citizenry. That's the backdrop of my comments. Neighbors in and around Castellea School and the community, by and large, support modernization of the school. It's much needed, and we want the students educated in a state-of-the-art manner. However, neighbors and residents want a compliant plan that is consistent across the city. No special privileges should be awarded. And this is one of my concerns about the most recent staff report. It is highly beneficial to Castellea, and I don't see it as a neutral document providing for board members the pros and cons of the project. And I'd like to go into specifically what those concerns are. First of all, as to the comprehensive plan, staff cites policy L 1.1, improves safety, sustainability, and programmatic space to serve students. Only 25% of Castellea students are from Palo Alto. We need to have a program that is less auto-centric, that allows for enforcement and accountability, which the staff has had tremendous difficulty with in past years. Preservation of trees that are of value to the community. We're talking about destroying 8 mature trees and 5 street trees are going to be moved. Those are a public resource. They belong to the citizenry of Palo Alto. As to the floor area ratio, whatever we call a garage, it's still a garage. Let's avoid the window dressings and obfuscations and get to the heart of having an updated, compliant school that serves the entire community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Vania Fang. You'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As direct neighbors of Castellea on Kellogg Street, we are happy to speak in support of Castellea's plans to modernize their campus. I know that at the last hearing, there were some questions about the massing of the new building along Kellogg, and we're happy to see the modified plans presented today respond directly to those questions by reducing the massing, varying the roof lines, and changing the materials palette. Castellea had taken the neighbors' feedback to heart and made changes that benefit all of us who live across from the school. I see the new one-story section of the building creates a light-filled passageway between the 2 taller structures, significantly reducing the massing and providing variation in the roof lines. These features, along with the addition of shingles in place of metal surfaces, change the look and feel of the building to echo the GUNN building and the chapel theater. The different setbacks break the buildings up into natural sections to mirror the neighborhood feel and scale more gracefully than the buildings that stand there now. We love this improvement, and we're quite impressed by the extent of changes that Castellea has made in these new plans. In particular, we appreciate the subtle and quiet entrance that will be hidden behind a wooden blind and gentle landscaping. For over a century, Castellea has had only one formal entrance to the school, and this has served to keep visitors focused in one place. We feel that more extensive entrance on Kellogg will require more signage and bring more activity to Kellogg Street. In addition, schools today really need to rely on one single entrance to ensure campus safety. That is why we're happy that the Kellogg entrance will be used primarily for drop-off and pickup and will not change from current usage patterns at all. The roof height now has more variety than the previous plan, and it is often lower than the current roof lines on the school building we live across from now. We recognize that there are questions about the pitch of the different roof areas, and I understand that the roof lines are flat to accommodate the solar panels that will provide energy to the net zero sustainable campus. We feel that this is a good trade-off to help the city of Palo Alto reach its ambitious sustainability goals. Thank you again for your time and attention to this important project for the city of Palo Alto and for women's education.
Thank you very much. Next speaker will be Rob Levitsky. You'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Rob Levitsky. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I own the property next to the school at 1215 Emerson Street. This will not be a green project. There's 900 kilograms of CO2 released for every ton of cement that you pour. There's a tunnel that you talked about recently. That tunnel goes 3 feet under the Melville sewer line. Where's the variance? And the variance for shifting the Melville public utility easement 15 feet so you can have this underground, what is it? Basement, parking structure, underground garage? Let's talk about events. 90 events is ridiculous. Other private schools like Stratford have 0 events and they go cold at 6:30 p.m. As far as the phased enrollment, the ARB last meeting suggested that no phased enrollment until all the buildings are done and all the temps removed. I stand by that. And trees. The staff and the EIR consultant have repeatedly misinterpreted the tree ordinance for protect oaks and redwoods. Oak trees 102, 140, and 150 are listed for removal. The trees are not hazardous. The trees are not due to wrong, and the city planners are wrong for allowing this. Acceptance of removing of these will gut the tree ordinance, as future builders will reference this as a precedent for removing any trees.
He's cutting out here.
And we're having trouble hearing this speaker.
Hi, Rob, if you're there, it sounds like you might be having some.
Did you miss? This is Rob.
We might need to ask Rob to submit something in writing.
Vin, let's, if we could move to the next speaker, if you could perhaps contact Rob and ask him if he could finish his statements at the end of everyone else, if he can get his connection improved.
Sure.
Thank you, Rob. We're going to go on to the next speaker, Cindy Chen. You'll have 3 minutes. As soon as Vin is ready, you can go ahead. Go ahead, please, Cindy.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today. As a near neighbor of Castellea, I want to share my support for their plans to modernize the campus. I realize this has been a years-long process involving multiple plan modifications, and the time has paid off with an excellent design. The current plans will improve the quality of life in our neighborhood with a sustainable building that is far more beautiful than an aging structure we live beside now. As a neighbor, I appreciate that some learning spaces are tucked below ground, but no one wants to be trapped in a dungeon. The architects have employed several common and time-tested techniques to capture natural light and carry it into the garden level. When I saw the renderings, I thought of several museums that I have visited. These museums share similar challenges as Castellea, limited land, and the need to create inviting educational space. Castellea accomplished this by incorporating light wells situated throughout the building, bringing light from above to those classrooms below. There are also terraces around the outside of the building at frequent intervals, allowing natural light into the side windows in those classrooms. Finally, there are light-filled hub spaces that span the 2 above ground stories and pour natural light below. Also, I appreciate Castellea being thoughtful of noise pollution. I'm fully aware of the controversies of how the church on the corner of Northern California and Bryant Street is used, resulting in the movement of the new Mozart School of Music. Housing music space, meeting space, and mechanical spaces systems underground makes a lot of sense to me. Certainly, Castellea has been considerate over these 7 years of responding to neighbor feedback. Most recent adjustments include rendering 2 homes, downsizing their underground parking facility, redesigning the building to reduce massing, changing the materials, and preserving trees, just to name a few. I think we have arrived at a point where city leaders should allow Castellea to update their campus with the thoughtful plan that incorporates feedback and improves the life in my neighborhood. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Carla Bufera. You'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you to the members of the ARB. In the last meeting, Chair Peter Balte noted it's not enough for the new campus to simply be superior to the buildings constructed in the 1960s. The city, he said, should hold Castellea to a higher standard. We must agree. As a resident across the street for over 50 years, we've too long lived with the current unsightly Jetson era design. This redesign of Castellea seemed a golden opportunity to not only reduce the campus's considerable impacts, but also to bring an architectural style consistent with the old Palo Alto neighborhood in which it is situated. The housing built on the former Palo Alto Medical Foundation site came to mind. The architects have described its new buildings as being in harmony with the remaining original structures, that is the GUNN administration building designed by Gustav Laumeister and the chapel designed by Burge Clark. We disagree that the proposed style is truly in keeping with those handsome buildings or with the neighborhood. The vertical planes and hard corners are nowhere to be found in the surrounding homes or indeed in the facades of the original buildings, which are graceful arts and crafts shingle with articulated dormers. The industrial facade that is proposed to loom the length of Kellogg may be compatible with the business zone, but is entirely out of character with this R1 neighborhood. We also draw your attention to the outsized nature of the project. The school is proposing 195,000 square feet of building. For comparison, this is larger than an average Costco, which is only 145,000 square feet. It's closer to 2 city halls or to 2 Home Depots. How is that appropriate for one small block in a residential neighborhood? We also ask you to re-review the extraordinary measures taken to redefine the proposed 32,000 square foot underground garage as a basement, albeit one that is not located under a building and in which cars are parked. The arguments made by the applicant's attorney and accepted by the PTC are a masterful example of flim-flam. As referenced under code, the school is permitted 0.3 FAR, but is asking for a current pre-existing FAR of 0.42. With the garage added, the proposed FAR is closer to 0.58, almost twice the permitted FAR. There's argument that unlike for a residence, a garage should not be included in the FAR. We dispute that interpretation. CUPs are not granted to single family homes, and the code clearly states that should a CUP be granted, then the area of the underground garage shall be counted in determining the floor area ratio for the site. Chair Balte is right to question this methodology. Staff's theory that footprint and underground garage rules only apply to residential uses would allow any non-residential use in R1 to add a vast underground complex with none of it counting as floor area. Thank you for your consideration of these issues.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Bruce McLeod. You'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. Thank you for the time to address the ARB. I live across the street from Castellet and have lived there for 20 years in a home that has been owned by has been in my family for almost 50 years. I am very concerned about the actual design of the buildings, but several other commentators have addressed those issues. What I'd like to look at primarily is a question of timing and process. There have been many comments made by Castellet supporters regarding the extraordinary length of time this process has taken and touting Castellet's community involvement. I was part of a small group of neighbors who met with Castellet from the beginning on this project. We consistently brought suggestions to Castellet only to be told, well, we'll study that. At the end of that process, magically, there was a master plan which we had not seen that was unveiled and submitted to the city. That process has continued. Most of what you see here has not been vetted by the neighborhood before it shows up. Much of it has been, much of our suggestions have fallen on deaf ears, not only at Castellet, but at the city staff. Castellet has an opportunity here. They are rebuilding over 70% of their campus. They can show that expansion and progress can happen without compromising what makes Palo Alto a special place. The neighbors believe that this can happen, but their pleas have fallen on deaf ears. A project of this scale and impact should be held to the highest possible standards, not only for how it serves the applicant's goals, but also for its ability to make life better in the surrounding community. The current plans do not meet that standard. There will be more traffic. There will be nebulous and largely unenforceable mitigation standards and construction that will make the neighboring streets unlivable for several years. The surrounding neighborhoods should never be looked on as collateral damage in the service of growth. Until that is changed, this project and many others in this city should continue to be studied and revised with the active engagement of neighbors. The neighbors deserve better. Palo Alto deserves better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Hank Sousa. You'll have 3 minutes, please.
Hello, Chair Balte and fellow board members. I live at 160 Melville Avenue, and my comments this morning are on the construction of a below-grade parking garage is unhealthy, unnecessary, and time-consuming. Consider this, approximately 15 months will be shaved off the construction timetable for the Castellet School project, which is slated to take between 3 and 5 years. A nice benefit to both applicant and nearby neighbors. The act of constructing something this large involves removing massive amounts of dirt, pouring large amounts of CO2 emitting concrete, and then returning some of the dirt. Thousands of trucks, thousands of gallons of burned diesel fuel fumes being emitted is simply not necessary. The school already has 86 at-grade parking spaces, so you can recommend they continue to be used. Reconfiguring the buildings and save those spaces. Shuttle in the people who currently get dropped off one at a time. That will reduce the daily car trips by approximately 800, which responds to one of the neighbors' concerns. As you put together your recommendation, consider asking yourself this: how can we reduce the impact on the neighbors, but still give the school a nice future? The answer is keep the at-grade parking spaces in lieu of building a garage, and recommend single student drop-offs be shuttled into the campus from satellite kiss and ride drop-off spots. Consider these worthy options and skip old technology in favor of creative green transportation. The school has several electric vans, so they are on the right track there. In closing, I would like to share a brief thought about the upcoming Palo Alto City Council election. 2 takeaways come to mind, one being the housing issue, and the other that residents should be empowered and listened to. Surprise us neighbors, show us that you listen to us, and recommend a less impactful project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Andy Reid. You'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you. My name is Andy Reid, and I live near Castellea School. Thanks to Chair Balté and board members for keeping up with these boards and commission meetings piling up very quickly. I would like to bring up a couple of points from the staff report. Regarding the EIR, please keep in mind that Alternative 4 has elements that were not originally studied in the draft EIR. New intense traffic patterns arise from adding 4 more driveways to 2 loops. The only mitigations offered is that the school will disperse traffic and the city will oversee and enforce. I'm sure you are aware that this type of oversight from the city has never actually happened. Staff report packet, page 13, number 8, sustainability materials, and packet page 36, finding number 6, are all concerned with the greenness of the project. We have learned about how the new buildings will be sustainable and environmentally cutting edge, but no discussion in any of these meetings about the underground garage and how it is good for the environment. Please review. Packet page 14, 2, continues the discussion about the underground garage and references the school's attorney letter. Other letters regarding this Muni Code issue from the public make a contrary, more direct and logical analysis, which I hope you have had a chance to read. The idea that this facility, which has been known as a garage for 4 years, is now not a garage but a basement, flies in the face of Palo Alto Muni Code. It is clearly not under the footprint of a building. The staff report mentions other examples, but they are not in R1 zones, so they are not relevant. There is one example of an R1 zone, a synagogue on 1.5 acres overlooking Foothill Expressway, that has 0 similarity to this project. The reason this is important is because the school wants less of an increase in FAR to be considered in the variance that they are seeking. And finally, it will be difficult for you to find in packet page 29, finding number 2D, that the project provides harmonious transitions in scale, mass, and character to adjacent land uses. Please refer to the architectural historian William Kosturis study that I sent to you on 9/28, which gives an overview of the surrounding small, older homes, and visualize, if you will, the rendering we've just seen looming across the street. Unrelenting mass and starkly modern, it would be beautiful floating in 20 acres of lawn at Menlo School. We applaud the school's education of girls, and we hope that they rebuild, modernize their school within reason, compatible with the neighborhood, and compliant with Muni Code. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Neva Yarkin. You'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead, please.
The ARB really needs to look at the traffic studies and student enrollment, because adding another 125 more students, 415 to 540, will have a major impact for the neighborhood and for the city of Palo Alto. The total number of car trips for the proposed expansion is 1,477. It doesn't matter how you disperse the car trips around Castellea, it is still 1,477 coming into the area. 75% of Castellea students are coming from outside of Palo Alto. The underground parking garage entrance will be off of Embarcadero and Bryant, and the exit will be Emerson Embarcadero. The entrance and exit of the underground parking garage should alone stop this expansion. How will any of this alleviate traffic congestion in the area of Palo Alto for the future? Is this making Palo Alto more environmentally or greenhouse friendly? Would any of you want this expansion coming near where you live? Will adding another 125 students plus parents, staff, and volunteers make Palo Alto a better place to live in or a better place to travel in? For all these traffic concerns, I'm against the expansion project. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Neva. That's the end of our list of speakers. However, I'd like to go back and see if Rob Levitsky would like to finish his comment. Vin, do we have any contact with Rob?
Chair Balta, unfortunately, Rob is no longer in this meeting, so I suspect his internet might have been going through some issues, but I did send him an email asking him to submit some written comments.
Thank you very much, Vin. Okay, well, for the record, we asked. And with that, we'll close the meeting to public testimony. The next step is to offer the applicant a chance to rebut any of the comments that have been made, if the applicant would care to do that. I'd like to suggest if Kathy Leidecker, the head of school, would like to say something, I would appreciate hearing her opinion, but it's up to the applicant. You have 10 minutes, whomever on the applicant's team would like to speak, if at all. Do we have anyone with the applicant who would like to make a rebuttal?
Hi. Sorry, just real quick. Veronica, can you change the timer to 10 minutes, please?
Hi, this is Mindy Romanowski with the applicant team. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine, Mindy. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for your time. We've met before. I'm the land use attorney working with Castellea, and I'm going to just clarify a few of the things that I heard this morning that I think might be helpful. And then if there's time, I may have our landscape architect answer a few questions or clarify a few things that we heard about trees. First and foremost, Chair Baltet, I heard you ask the question about variances and wondering whether they would apply or could apply for the size of an establishment. I just want to make it clear, and I do have correspondence about the findings to be made for variance for this project. The variance language in your code does not prohibit the ability to replace the school's FAR. We're not expanding our FAR, rather we're just asking to replace it so that we avoid a hardship or disparate treatment from other parcels in the R1 zone. And in our application, we include a few letters which lay out the findings to support that variance. If you take a look at those letters, you'll see a map of the overall zoning. Our parcel is over 6 acres, one of the biggest when you look at the map in the entire zone. And so when you look at the relative basis of FAR for our property versus all the other properties in the zone, our proposed FAR is actually about 7% less than what's allowed for the other parcels in the zone. And that is the reason why we have put forward our application for the variance as allowed by your code to just maintain. Actually, we're going to be a little bit less than what we have right now. And I would point you to that letter. It is going to go before the PTC. But if you're interested, I'm happy to forward it to this board as well. With regard to the underground parking facility, there is no prohibition to build an underground parking facility in an R1 zone for non-residential use. I have a letter in the record dated September 8th, which walks through all the various code sections. I will admit it's complex and complicated. But when you look at your code, in addition to the precedent for other projects around Palo Alto, you know, this application for an underground parking facility is worthy of approval. It's certainly supported by legal findings. And, you know, this parking facility really, the history of it, it was conceived by the neighbors. We have had over 50 meetings with neighborhood groups over the last 4 to 5 years. Very early on, they requested that we study an underground parking facility to reduce impacts to the neighborhood. I said this to the PTC a couple of weeks ago, and it bears repeating here. I distinctly remember looking at putting in the underground parking facility, taking it to Castellea's board, knowing it would be a big task to take on, but really, you know, envisioning our entire plan based upon an underground parking facility. We knew that it would come with some, you know, some site development strategies. And so we made it a priority. You know, parking at grade does come with impacts, and that was evidenced in the EIR. And so this underground parking facility really serves to reduce impacts to the neighborhood, headlights, you know, cars slamming their doors, all of the things that come with parking at grade. Quickly, a couple of other things I heard. The construction timeline, our construction timeline, as was reviewed in the EIR and put forward in the application, is 3 years or less. The type of construction that we're using, it's a technical term, but these CLT, NDT structural supports, they go quicker. And so it could even be less time than 3 years. Certainly you saw in your packet today examples of what our temporary campus plan would look like, very tasteful modulars. We're going to screen them and have every intention to remove them as soon as possible. We understand that, no one wants to have temporary modulars there for any longer than they need to be, and we need our field back. So those will be removed as soon as humanly possible once our project is complete. And then, I've heard questions and comments today about traffic. That was studied as well in the various traffic reports in the EIR. I know it's confusing. It's very technical. And, you see these numbers of trips, but we are an operating school right now. We already have cars coming and going. That's an existing condition. And we have done a lot to reduce those impacts with our TDM programs, our shuttle systems. We're not adding 1,000 trips. We are adding much less than that. And we're keeping them at a constant, even though we're growing our enrollment. We've requested to grow our enrollment a bit every year. Our trips will remain constant. So, and I apologize that I'm not quoting the exact number of trips. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I would direct you to the various traffic reports. As I'm not a traffic engineer, I do know that we're highly committed to keeping those impacts low and not increasing those. Finally, I'd like to pass this quickly off to our landscape architect to clarify a few things we heard today about trees, if he's available. Mike, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm Mike Bellinger with BFS Landscape Architects with an office in Mountain View. And we've worked very closely with the architects and the project arborist, Mick Bench, to track all the trees that are on campus. And it's been very thoughtful about how to preserve as many trees as possible. So I have a total of 164 on the property. 17 trees will be removed and 53 will be planted in their replacement. In that 17 total, there are 3 oaks that are going to be removed, and 12 will be added back of a reasonably good size 24 to 40 inch box trees. In addition, 2 street trees will be removed with changing locations for the driveways at the school. But in addition to replacing those, we'll be replacing additional street trees that have been previously removed by the city. The other opportunity we have is relocating existing trees. A total of 28 will be relocated, with an additional 47 trees added to mitigate the potential impact on their tree vigor by moving them around on campus. Working with the garage architect, their structural engineer, geotechs, and our arborist, the garage footprint has been reduced significantly from the perimeter, allowing us to save several oaks and redwoods. And in addition to the tree protection plan, there's additional mitigation to maintain irrigation and mulch and continue to keep equipment outside of those protection zones. So there's been quite a bit of thought put into that, and worked closely with Walter, pointing out things that we need to clarify in terms of how to deal with utilities and construction. But we feel that we're pretty well mitigated any impact from tree removal.
If I could just add one more thing, since we do have a couple of minutes left here. I was able to pull up those trip numbers as you were speaking, Mike. So just to be clear, this project would add 279 net daily trips to the existing trips. But then we are required to mitigate that, mitigation measure 7A in the EIR. And I know this is not your purview today, ARB, but I know questions have come up. It's very confusing about traffic. And there's thousands of trips coming. I've heard that today at least once, if not many times. I just think that it bears repeating that we operate as an existing school. It's a theme that runs throughout all of these comments we've heard. We're not asking to to change what we're doing. We are asking to grow our enrollment, but we're keeping the impacts constant. The EIR validated that over and over again. There are no significant and unavoidable impacts. That is the purpose of that EIR. So everything that you're looking at today in your purview, we feel very proud about the sustainability, the modifications we've made to the Kellogg facade, the things we've done to bring some of the elements from the GUNN building, the historic elements around the project to make a more cohesive plan, retaining the circle, but making it smaller, allowing for increased setbacks. You know, and we would invite you, if you have other questions about some of the things that you raised in your last meeting, to ask any members of our team to address, as we are here today for you. Thank you so much for your time and your service.
Thank you very much, Mindy Romanowski, and to the applicant. With that, we will bring the issue back to the board and begin our discussion. Before we start discussing the issue, I'd like to just make a quick statement that I think might help us frame the issue, and perhaps also for the community as a whole, because I think most of the board members actually understand this. But this is a large property with an established institutional use set in the middle of an established residential neighborhood. There's inherently many complicated zoning issues that will arise. The Architecture Review Board is charged to make finding number one, that the project is compatible with the current zoning code. That's where I believe we have to step in and base our findings on some of these issues. So questions like the legitimacy of the underground parking garage, or the impact of the traffic, or the increase of the FAR, or the legitimacy of the variance on that, or the timeline for construction, are issues that we inherently rely on staff to make a determination, and we cooperate with the Planning and Transportation Committee to help us decide on. And so I think my colleagues on the board understand that, and I hope we address our comments keeping that in mind. With that, why don't we start with Grace Lee, giving us her opinion of the project so far. Grace, go ahead.
Thank you, Peter. And Peter, I so appreciate your introduction to our board's comments. You actually covered a lot, and you run these meetings so well. So I just want to congratulate you, Peter, but also just remind everyone who's present in terms of what our purview is. And I just want to begin by extending a few gratitudes. I really appreciate the time that the community has invested in our City of Palo Alto process, and spending the time today and at our previous meeting with the Architecture Review Board. It is very helpful to hear your thoughts and feedback. I'd like to also thank, as always, our planning staff. Thank you so much to our chief planning official. This is a very big project, and it's been just so helpful to have reports that are clear, also to hear from the city arborist. And then, if I may, our HRB, who recently actually deliberated on this project, voted in favor and really support our findings, our ARB findings, number 2. And terrific to hear that the subcommittee will be reviewing a detail related to their process. And then to the PTC, I look forward, and I think all our board members do, to hearing a summary of that upcoming meeting and their discussion of issues that are so important to this project. And I just wanted to highlight briefly, just everything that, we understand from this project from the final EIR. And issues that relate to what the applicant has reminded us in terms of operations and the history of this applicant in terms of managing various aspects that relate to architecture and landscape. I look forward to hearing how that all goes in terms of managing the TDM and major events, the phasing. And I do want to step back and also thank the applicants and consultants in terms of how they have sharpened their pencil several times. And my comments will be addressing how they have responded to specific comments from our previous ARB meeting. So with that, I will go to and begin with just some of the asks. I believe that there was some discussion of just really understanding what those temporary structures and the layout would be. exactly, you know, how that occurs in site plan, but also in terms of the rendering, and hearing the assurance that you know, obviously would be revisited and thought about very much in terms of the phasing and moving into the actual construction schedule. So the next thing I wrote down was trees. And overall, hearing from especially the landscape architect and the city arborist, I am so encouraged to hear that there are these mitigating impacts that have been really, you know, thought about quite a bit, and the assurance of the redwoods at the garage, and overall the hopefully net gain in the future in terms of tree canopy and overall replacements as well as preservation. So I think what I'll do is think about more specifically a few of the comments that relate to each edge of campus. And so I'll begin with Bryant Street, and particularly that one-story entry porch, which I believe will function as a very positive gathering place, entry node, somewhat bit, like a fulcrum in terms of, you know, just having that. I think that this architectural expression of that option number 2, I'm highly in support of that. I think that in terms of the that it is a porch on both sides, that actually the architectural treatment blends in nicely with the overall Bryant facade elevation. I just wanted to point to that Bryant Street entry porch as one of the most positive aspects of the design that I see it move forward. On Kellogg Street, here now we're going to kind of learn more about materials and color. And thank you for revisiting that design in terms of breaking down. I believe we talked about the length of the facade as one mass. And I'm encouraged, I think one of the community members also talked about, it is encouraging to see that there's actually a variation, the applicant presented also, in terms of the planes, that it's not one single plane. And sometimes it's hard to see that in these architectural renderings, but it does come in and out, and there is an attention to how to kind of recede and come forward. I believe that the transition from it was a steel panel to ceramic tiles is a strong move that it to me is quite satisfying. I do think that the color, which actually is a green ceramic tile, is reminiscent of the historic building on campus. And I do think that the shingles and its texture, and it's also kind of brings the palette of the whole campus together. So I appreciate that very much. I think it recalls the historic building, but also complements the rest of the new layer. I guess on my side, I wonder if there's opportunity, and perhaps this is not needed. There's very mature canopy. There's very mature street trees. But I did want to, and it creates a terrific foreground. But I did want to just question, maybe the board can comment. I'm not sure if that green ceramic tile could find itself again further down on Kellogg, or maybe there's some aspect where that green tile just doesn't happen once. Actually we see it as a highlight or as something that occurs at an upper level. I was thinking maybe it's, I know you have the shingles that come up and hide the planter, but I'm just thinking of something that could perhaps show itself and have that green ceramic tile be really part of that facade and not just in one place. So I just wanted to throw that out, and in no way, I'm not prescribing in any way. I feel very confident the applicant will come back with more details and understand their proposal even better in a future date. On Emerson, as we turn the corner, my thought is on Emerson, and I know that it was presented previously, and forgive me, because I see the fence and walls, the wall type 1 and fence type 5 and fence type 4. And I think that on this campus with all the landscape details, I'm so grateful that the gate type A, B, C, and D, and fence type 1, 2, and 3, well, fence type 1 and 2 are really these historic, and you have the type that is kind of holds together very well. It's all that tube steel, and it sits on top of the brick. And in fence type 3, you've added this other vertical fence type, and I just hesitate with the horizontality that's introduced with the acoustical wall in the fence type 5 and fence type 4. However, I know that it only occurs in very small places. Whenever you see a fence or a wall, it really is, for me, part of the landscape, but it ties together landscape and architecture at a pedestrian scale. And I think it's an opportunity, again, to think about how the whole palette is coming together in a way that's cohesive, but with enough variation that it reflects, this old and new. And so I know that it's a concrete wall and it's an acoustical wall that's going to shield for the sound and it's for the pool. I'm wondering if maybe those verticals and horizontals want to be married a little bit further in terms of that fence wall type. And I vote for the vertical and looking at the historic fence again and bringing that forward. And by now, this is kind of a small comment in a way, but I just wanted to put it out there for the rest of the board to weigh in and for the applicant to consider when they come back in, I believe, early November. So the final comment that I had was really just in terms of the landscape that we see on Emerson Street. Yeah, I guess we just don't have all the landscape quite yet. In terms of when I looked at the plans, I'm curious to see what happens in terms of the final landscape plans with the fence. And also, I think that, and forgive me if I missed it, but I just didn't see the landscape plans. What I see only is from the March drawings, that the link that was sent in terms of the houses. And so I just want to make sure what's going to be happening with the park lawn and the houses. So I think that's what we're waiting for in early November. But I will pass it on. I'm happy to continue this project to a date certain. I believe that it was early November, and want to thank you for this application.
Thank you very much, Grace. David, can we go to you next?
Yes, okay. My take is fairly different from Grace's here. I think that our major concern the last time we met on this was that we have an unrelenting building along Kellogg, and we were looking for some major changes to that. But I'd like to take a step back first and talk about how the process has worked its way through with the planning of this whole project. It really began with the removal of the Arts building, the reduction in the Bryant building, opening up the space between the future Bryant building and the GUNN administrative building, creating that porch between the Bryant building and the Kellogg building. And so there is an openness to the campus from the Bryant side that is certainly a radical improvement to the scheme. And it appears that that is the major place of entry for the campus entirely, with the Kellogg entry being a rather minor portion of that. But to go back to the planning once again, the planning has created a classroom building which is really 3 stories high. And 2 of the stories are above grade. One of them is entirely below grade. And there's been remedial ideas here as to how to bring daylight into the spaces below. But I asked the architect the question just how many classrooms there are below. And you know, we never have received really, really good sections through the building, through the Kellogg building, where all of these classrooms and private rooms and offices and meeting rooms, et cetera, are going to be. And I note that on one section, only one section of this lower level, there are windows, high windows, that allow light, natural light, into the basement area. I'm really concerned about the way in which that is accomplished. I know there's been a tremendous effort here to create borrowed light into the basement, but that's a program. I mean, that program is approximately 1/3 of the entire classroom program happening below grade. Understandable that the functions that happen in the cellar, like music rooms or art rooms or whatever, music rooms in particular, can function rather well in the cellar. But where there's so many other offices and meeting rooms and socializing spaces and classrooms, which wasn't defined for us, I'm concerned that natural light, natural ventilation isn't happening in those spaces. Normally, that's not something that we would concern ourselves about so much, because it's not our responsibility. We're talking about aesthetics here, but I think it's an important aspect to this building. And I'm bothered by the fact that there are 3 feet more height potential to this building, where it could be raised 3 feet and more light brought down, more natural light, more natural ventilation through the use of areaways and et cetera, from the perimeter, so that you really aren't doing it through borrowed light. I'm certainly willing to look at this more to see how that effect of borrowed light is really working. And I wish it had been presented to us in greater detail, because I really feel that's an important aspect of this project. We're concerned if we think about our normal purposes, our findings, enhancing the desirability of living conditions is one of them. And I know it applies to residential mostly, but in this case, I think it's sort of like residential. These are school kids that are there all day long, and they need to have borrowed light. They need to have natural light. They need to have, it would have to be proven to me that it is effective, all of the aspects of borrowed light into that basement area, 1/3 of the entire school program. And then, of course, the more major concern that I still have is that despite the fact that there's insets and there's breaks in the volume of the Kellogg Street facade, it's a very, very long facade. It's almost 400 feet long, something like that, six or more railroad cars in length. And there was a lot of, and I'm respectful of the concern that the neighbors have, that they're looking at something which is one long, unrelenting building form. And it seems to me that having spent this much effort on the Bryant Street side to create an entry into the campus, that there would have been some way to break up the volume of the Kellogg Street side and create an entry and perhaps an actual breakup of that volume itself, more or less towards the middle of the circle, so that there would be an additional kind of way in which students could get in and out. Now, I'm not so sure that the neighbors along Kellogg are going to be interested in that, but in terms of just access to the campus and access to the functions that happen on this campus, I think it's important to create as much penetration as possible. We're doing it along the Bryant Street side. Clearly, all the vans will come in into the parking lot. on the Emerson Street side, and and, and you have then that opportunity to create a break in the volume on the Kellogg Street side and provide that as a way of students getting in. You know, if you really look at that whole length of Kellogg Street, people could park along there. They likely will park along there. And that will be a significant delivery location for students. And it would be a tremendous relief for the garage as well, because the garage is not an easy access to the campus. You're down a level, you go down again, you go through a tunnel, you have a staircase that's 20 feet high to get you to grade. You're still not into the campus at that point. And therefore, the Kellogg Street side, this is obviously a PTC issue, but it's something that affects the architecture as well. And I don't think it's adequately accomplished on that side of the campus. And I think it could be done in such a way that it again sort of mirrors the entries to the GUNN building and creates a scale to it, but breaks down the scale of the building on the Kellogg Street side. I am really I'm actually pleased that the circle has been reduced. I can understand the school's memory image of this being a very important space. I think traditions like that are, of course, significant. And I think the fact that it's being retained is a significant, it's a nice idea. I think events that will happen there, that is the space after all for the entire school. But why does it have to have a vehicle circulation plan around it? Why can't vehicles be kept out and it's simply a pedestrian space? I would think that the landscaping would improve significantly if it reduced the amount of circulation around the center circle and made it more landscaping and more related to the use of pedestrians in that area. And I want to go back on one item here. I think it's possible to raise the building along Kellogg Street. So I go back on that because if that happens, I see a whole different transition into the campus. Raising it up enough to bring light down to the basement, coming through at a sort of an upper level, coming out onto areas which overlook the center in a better way. And it's a more dynamic campus at this point, raised up just slightly. I don't think you would lose the informality and the scale that you're trying to achieve at the Bryant Street corner, but you would improve definitely the light and life of the building, the Kellogg Street building and the Bryant Street building by providing the possibility of light down, a more direct light down to the basement area. In terms of the mass, it's very important to create a break in the 400-foot long Kellogg Street elevation. The break that is now connecting through with the green tile, et cetera, you know, let's not talk about materials until we solve the issue of really creating connections in the campus that really make sense. And I don't see it making sense unless you raise the building to an allowable FAR, to the allowable height of the building, the 30, I think it's 33 feet. It's now 30 feet. It could be raised 30 to 33 feet. At present, in fact, the building is 34 feet 6 in height. So 33 feet is a reasonable raising of the building and providing more natural light to the cellar and creating this upper level, lower level, and providing an entry, another major entry along Kellogg Street that will access the program of the building in an appropriate area and change the volume of the Kellogg Street facade. A few more items to talk about here. I appreciate all of Grace's detail about the fencing, about the perimeter, about the trees. I think that the change in the parking to preserve more of the trees is a good idea. I do believe that there's an attempt to really deal with the trees of the entire lot. And I really appreciate actually the parking garage, which I think is a tremendous value to the school, gets the cars off the streets and the perimeter, gets them into a location where they can be unaffecting the neighborhood, gets them there as efficiently as possible. I like the parking garage. I think it really works. I'm not as happy with the connection through to the campus. There's an elevator, staircase immediately as you get under the utility easement. And you come up in the corner of the campus that you're not really there yet. It interferes with an open area that connects from the circle to the playing field. I really think it should be a tunnel all the way through to the center and connect up with a staircase that gets you right there to the center of the campus. And that you keep the passageway through. This is a detail. I'll admit that it is possible it would work the way it is, but it just seems more appropriate that you create that connection from the parking garage directly to the campus center for everybody. And then come up to grade at that point. Other than that, personally, I think that the swimming pool is not really solved that well where it's located. It's sunken into the ground down at a lower level. There's an attempt to create a sound barrier between it and the neighborhood. I don't think it really is going to do that. I think the sound is going to bounce off the gym wall and you'll hear it all over the place. I know we didn't get there today, but I think that the issue of the park that you see in the site plans to date, and then the question of what happens with the Loki house and the historical issues ought to be addressed. I personally think it's important that the campus use that area. My preference would be that the swimming pool goes there, that it can be put in a structure that covers over it. Perhaps that's also true in its present location, that there could be a structure over it that really contains it, a glass structure of some sort at the end of the gym that contains it. It isn't just a wall on the perimeter. That's an important aspect to this. The neighborhood may not be aware of it, but at some point, the sound penetration to the wall of Emerson Street is not going to work. I don't think it's going to work. I mean, you'd have to show me that it would work. But a wall with a soundproof wall to me doesn't do it. So then build a structure over the top of it, create an enclosure, glass enclosure perhaps, and create an area for the swimming pool that's more separates that function from the neighborhood. Just a couple of more items. I guess no, the Loki part, Loki, and the sound. I guess I've really covered all of them, but I want to go back a little bit here because we certainly have been. We certainly find the neighborhood's opinions to be very useful. Some of them. Questions of Kellogg Street elevation, I think would be answered by even more of a breakup of the form of the building. Personally, I think there are other ways in which we could use the historical way in which the GUNN building is built with a stucco in the base and the shingles on the top, so that there is a contrast between the planes that are more of a planar quality, like the stucco, to portions of the base, and less of the shingle siding combination. I find that doing both of those together is pushing the envelope of natural feeling too far. And it isn't really at all in keeping with the way the GUNN building is built, the original GUNN building. I like the way in which there is a stucco portion to that building and a shingle portion to that building. It strikes me that that's more in the form of an institutional building, in a form that is more, as well as more of a residential feel to it as well. So it's a combination of institutional residential that I think really works well. And I think you need to have more of a contrast of materials on the outside. And I would like to suggest that you work with that. I also find that the GUNN building has a cornice that is green, and I think that just a planar wall that's green is not as effective as if you took the entire upper level of the overhang roofs and continued the idea of a green element on the perimeter of the building that sort of mirrored the GUNN building as well. That would carry the character through. Using a planar wall that's green because it references the GUNN building isn't as useful as trying to actually do what the GUNN building does and use that green as a linear element at the top of the building. I think that would be more effective. I honestly think that there were a couple of different looks at the Bryant Street side, and some of the green was carried into one of the elevations, and I liked it very much, but I didn't see it in what was shown today. So just to recap a little bit, eliminate the car from the courtyard, increase the landscaping in the courtyard, break up the volume of the building along Kellogg, create actually two separate elements out of it in some way, create a new entry onto Kellogg, allow the student body to enter more into the center of Kellogg and through to the courtyard, maintain the separation between Kellogg and the courtyard where all the activity will happen. I don't think it's a problem of affecting the neighborhood if you simply have an entry into that point, that the activities of the courtyard should not affect the Kellogg Street facade, the Kellogg Street residents. So that's really it. I'm done.
Thank you very much, David. Those were very insightful comments. Alex Liu, would you care to go next, please?
Okay, so first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for sending in the email comments. I did read all of the ones that arrived up until last night. I didn't read the ones that arrived this morning, though, but thank you for all of those. There were some very interesting points in them. And then thank you for the revisions to the project. I did look at those. I generally have positive feedback regarding them. I did, though, find it hard to review. Like I still think we're on the second hearing, and we still haven't really seen like a complete landscape plan or really complete building plans. And so we're going into the third hearing really sort of without all of the information that we would normally receive with an application. So I find it a little bit frustrating, but thank you, staff. I think everything was clear. I think generally my comments are more similarly aligned to Board Member Lee's. I think I do like David's comments. I think, though, they do really raise a lot of problems. It seems to me like raising the floor height to allow more light to the lower level. Typically, that would trigger counting the basement as square footage in Palo Alto. Typically, once you go above 3 feet above grade, then we count the basement as a whole story. So I think that that's going to open up a huge can of worms. And also there is a height limit, and so that's going to be that'll be another point of contention, is going over the height limit. And then the buildings would be really a lot taller than the neighboring buildings. So I think it's intriguing, but it seems to me, it seems like it's going to be very difficult to achieve. On the Bryant, or on the Kellogg Street facade, I do like the revisions, although I did see that the neighbors directly across the street do prefer the 2-story continuous wall. So I guess I'm leaning towards Board Member Lee's point about maybe having an additional accent wall or something. I think it could use one more break or one more visual break. It doesn't have to be a complete building break. One additional break, I think, would go a long way to breaking the scale. And I would also consider, if there is anything that you can do with the overhang, modifying the overhangs, or if there is some sort of very small mechanical screen for the photovoltaics, that maybe there can be some variation in there, just to provide more variety on the Kellogg facade. The Bryant facade, I think, is looking really good. I think the addition of the porch works really well. I still do have concerns about planting so many oak trees in the spaces between the buildings. I think I'm in line. I think on the Emerson Street facade, I'm also thinking similarly to Board Member Lee. I'm a little bit worried about the fence. I think it's fairly long. I'm looking for variations in there. The section that you showed at the pool with the landscape, I think, is looking good. And the berm, I think there's like a new berm in there. From what I can tell so far, it looks good, but I haven't really seen the whole design. I'm generally in support of the parking garage. I know it's a big issue with the neighbors. I do recall why Palo Alto restricted garages in the basements of houses. My recollection was it was there's a house on Waverly that was one of the first that had the big ramps going down to the garage, and it was the ramps in the side yard that was really a concern about from the community. But I think in this particular case, I think it can work. And I think the added benefit is that that there's that the parking is underground. All the lighting that you would have in a surface parking lot is all down below grade. All the noise that you get when people are doing the drop-offs is down below grade, so it'll be quieter. So I think that there are numerous things that benefits of the garage. If there is if there's like synthetic turf above the roof, I think I would like to see that in the next hearing. Again, the tree, I'm still interested in the tree mitigation with the replacement trees and where those are located. I do want to see a full landscape plan, especially around the edges of the project along the sidewalk. The original scheme showed a very large number of very large shrubs, like coffee berries and even bigger. And I didn't really understand where those were, if those were along the sidewalk or if those were along the building. But it has a dramatic impact on how the neighbors would see the project. And I just really don't have any sense for where those are. So, and then also the photovoltaic screening. I think I just wanted to remind the neighbors, I think what Palo Alto normally does is require the structures that hold up the panels have to be within the height limit. And Amy, please correct me if I'm wrong. And then the panels themselves are less restricted. And normally, at least in the commercial zones, you can get a little bit of extra height for mechanical screening, and so maybe there's some way that we can look at that or consider that for this particular project. I did something in the architectural section that was shown today. Okay, and then one last item, just a minor item that I have is the new staircase at the GUNN building. So I think I recall that there was a photometric plan in one of the sets somewhere. I didn't re-review it. But in my experience, like the exterior stairs, I think were nice, except at nighttime, because the lighting, the emergency lighting that you have to use that is required can be very unattractive at night. So I think that we should take a look at that in the next hearing, and I'll go through that. But I do want to see. I think we should look at the cut sheets for that fixture. So I think that's what I have. So thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Very nice comments. Ozma, your turn.
All right, thank you. Yeah, also going to express my gratitude to staff and the applicant. I would concur with board member Lou's note that having conformed set would really help, sort of like disclaiming that a lot of the stuff that we've reviewed is a bit hodgepodge, and just having something complete and whole to look at will be really great for the next hearing. I also really appreciate all the public comment that we received, especially the comment that really talked about the architecture and really focused on the architecture. Believe it or not, that's I feel like in my whole time serving on the board, I haven't really seen this level of public response as it relates specifically to the architecture. So I really appreciate that. It definitely gave me, and I'm sure a lot of my board members, a bit more to chew on in terms of the perspectives. So really appreciate that. I'm gonna sort of respond to some of the things that some of my other board members have mentioned, and then sort of circle back. I tend to agree with board member Lee and board member Lou for the most part in terms of their commentary. I actually disagree a lot with what board member Hirsch had to say on some items. Sorry, David. Specifically, like the suggestion of using stucco on the building, I don't think is appropriate.
Say stucco. You didn't really say that. It's just material change.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the materiality of the project as it is right now does appear to be very compatible while kind of pushing the envelope and bringing something new to Palo Alto that is really beautiful. And I think that's important. For the Kellogg facade, I do appreciate the setback that happened. I did see the comment about a concern about the acoustics with that change in massing. And I do think it would be worth maybe the applicant bringing their acoustical consultant just to explain. I think in my understanding, you know, if the noise is happening at a certain level and the barrier is at a certain height, even if there's, you know, a building on the other side, it should be, in terms of like the noise maker and the noise receiver, it should be fine. But it would be good to get confirmation from the acoustical consultant. I think also the materials chosen, the shingle and the wood, have articulation to them that it would break up the sound more than if it was a flat wall. So I think in terms of the acoustic concerns, you know, the acoustical fence that goes along Emerson, I hear the concerns of Board Member Liu and Board Member Lee on that, and I don't think we've actually received very good visuals for what that fence, for what Emerson looks like with the new fence, or not with the new fence, but just with the project alternative. It's possible that that could be really unrelenting, and I even have questions about fence number 3 in terms of its articulation, if that is appropriate. So just to see that, I would agree that a vertical expression might be more appropriate than a horizontal, but it's hard to know without seeing the design intent. Additionally, I did notice in the materials palette, the oka wood is indicated to happen in the glazing. And I was planning on asking the applicant to really point out where that's happening on the facades, but I think that might just be better if that just happens when this comes back to us. In the renderings, it's really hard to tell where that's happening, and some clarification of how that material is used throughout the facade would be really helpful, because right now in a lot of the renderings it just looks like clear glass and the wood. I do appreciate the details for the planted balconies, and I appreciate on Kellogg the choice to swap out the metal with the shingles. I think that is a positive choice. Did not get to see the green tile in person. I think I probably found out about that too late. But again, I'll look forward to that at the next hearing. So I think that might be most of it. I do have a question about the historical building facade. Just with that quick image that we saw on the presentation at the staff report, the picture of what it looked like historically and the new doesn't look very similar. And I don't know that it needs to be, but it looks pretty blank right now. And I'm wondering if that might be a problem. So maybe just a bit more clarification on what's happening there. Okay, yeah, I think I will leave my notes there for now.
Great, thank you very much, Ozma. Thanks everybody for their comments. I've been struggling with this project and trying to put my finger on why. And so I spent some time the other day just sort of driving up and down streets, a block or 2 blocks away, approaching the school, looking at it. And I'm finding that I just can't feel that it's compatible with the neighborhood somehow. And I'm beginning to think maybe it has to do with the design style. So I've given a lot of thought to that. And I think that while Palo Alto enjoys many distinctive contemporary residential designs, their overall effect on the character of a neighborhood is modulated by the size. The R1 zoning standard wisely limits the size of any single development. The result is an interesting and attractive eclecticism, reflecting the character of the whole town. Blending old and new, large and small, Birch Clark with Joseph Eichler. Unfortunately, the project before us is consistently large and different from the surrounding homes, such that it overwhelms the neighborhood, disrupting the delicate balance that gives such character and charm to the community. I wrote that down, but I think that that's the core of what I'm thinking, is that I don't mind different architectural styles, and I think Palo Alto's done great by having different architectural styles. But we're missing the fact that when you let a single building in a residential neighborhood become this large of the same architectural style, it's no longer an eclectic charm and adding character to the community. It overwhelms the community. It overwhelms the neighborhood. that was abundantly clear driving up and down Kellogg and Bryant and Emerson, approaching the school. There's this beautiful rhythm of all different kinds of houses, which are like all different kinds of people in town. And then all of a sudden, this single large building looms, and I'm really bothered by that. So I think the massing is too homogeneous, and that, especially I think that has to do with the roof treatment. I think the planar modulations of the facade are nice, and I'll come to the materials in a second, but the consistent 400-foot long, 12 or 15-inch wide fascia board is just inappropriate in my mind. I'd like to see, really going to insist on seeing some kind of pitched roof forms, break into shapes. I think breaking the mass of the building is a good thing, although it brings in some acoustical questions. I think you could do more of that. But really, when you look at these facades and look at them next to the GUNN building or other buildings across the street, the fact that the roof is a flat, continuous plane, a single fascia of that length, I think is the single most difficult thing to accept. I just think we need some sort of change to the way the roofs are formed in order for this to be acceptable and that it fits into the community. I find that the materials as they stand are really beautiful and attractive, and they do hark back to the historical nature of other buildings on the campus and in the community. The shingles, I could see this, I didn't see the ceramic tiles in person, but I can imagine them working nicely. Grace made some interesting points about incorporating that further. The architects wanting to reuse the doors from the old school. All of that is good stuff. But when you put 400 feet of the same good stuff and treat it exactly the same way down the line, it's just too much. And it's too much, not that it wouldn't be great in a field on a 20-acre campus, but it's too much for a neighborhood. It just overwhelms what's there now. People might argue that what's there now is doing the same thing, and to some degree it is. It's weathered, it's aged, we're all used to it. But I put it to my colleagues on the board, that's not a standard we can aspire to just because what's there now. I think this is incumbent upon us to find a solution that respects the community and blends in with the residential neighborhood. We see all these zoning challenges, all these questions that come up, and they're complicated, and there's lawyers and planners and planning commissions working to resolve the garage in a zoning neighborhood. How do you count FAR in a commercial industrial building in a residential neighborhood? Well, we're architects, and the architectural issue is how do you fit a large institutional building into a dense and established residential neighborhood? And I think you do it with a little more variety, a little more variation, a little more difference in the style, not just one thing all the way down the line. So I support other comments we've made about some of the things like the fences, the use of the parking garage, et cetera. But to me, the issue will hinge on the treatment of the building forms along Kellogg Street and along Bryant Street. And I think in particular, it involves changing the roof forms to some degree or another. So I want to just be super clear that that's my position on that. And I hope I can gather some support from other board members that I think that's what has to change. That long single linear facade, fascia, is just really ruining it for me. I'd like to also throw out, that's the end of my opinion comments on this, but I'm concerned about the process here. We've been through 2 hearings already. We still haven't seen a full set of drawings of this project. And staff has explained correctly that they just haven't received from the applicant because there's so much feedback and so many people and parties at play here describing what's going on. But without a full set of drawings, we're just not able to really look into this. For example, the fence on Emerson, several board members have very legitimate concerns about that, and we don't even have a design for it. Traditionally, we're stuck to 3 reviews of these projects. So if we get back in November, which means the applicant has 2 weeks to respond to these comments, another package, even with a full set of drawings, then it's just not enough time to possibly address these concerns. And I feel I will be compelled to then push to have the project denied rather than continued, because I risk continuing a project that's already on its 3rd go round. And I'm just being really clear with staff. I've raised this privately and to my colleagues on the board that this project is being pushed and there's changes in the architecture that are not being addressed as seriously as I believe they need to be. And we're not being given a full set of drawings and an explanation of what's really being proposed. So I caution the architect and staff that we need to really understand and have presented to us what is being proposed. And I would really encourage the architect to take enough time to really feel confident that you've addressed our concerns and fully can garner our full support. Any other comments from other board members, given what everybody else has said?
Peter, if I may, I'd love to just address some of fellow board members' comments and also this issue of incomplete, and just clarify some of my comments. I actually feel, and really appreciate the board's comments. I feel like there is consensus between us. There is a commonality in that we do feel like there are a few things missing. So if we talk about what's missing, and know that the applicant has provided quite a bit of information, but it seems like we are reacting, from what I heard, is to the missing landscape plan, right? And something that cohesive, that is something that we can digest, that really understands the full edge on Emerson, Kellogg, and Bryant. And given that our task is to continue this item, I think there is consensus. We all want to continue to a date certain, early November. My feeling is that the applicant could come forward with what is asked. And then I just wanted to go back to Peter, your comments, and also to David's. Thank you so much. I don't agree, and respectfully disagree in terms of the amount of change that is needed. I think, in my comments in the past two meetings, just to reiterate, or maybe it just didn't come through, my feeling is that the biggest concern was really that Kellogg Street elevation, and the change that has been made in terms of a break that is now 1 story with a railing is significant, and a change of material and color and depth. To me is very much in line with what I was hoping that the applicant might come forward with. I do not feel like there's an issue in terms of neighborhood compatibility. I'm very happy to make the finding that the overall project is very much compatible with the neighborhood. And I so appreciate your comments, Peter, in terms of really looking at the neighborhood. And I have myself, I've actually spent a lot of time walking in this neighborhood and driving, and appreciate kind of the mix of historic and modern and contemporary. My feeling is what the applicant has proposed, and I'm sure I didn't come out more clearly in my previous comments and today, is that they've actually presented something that is not large, that is not different, that respects the history of what was there before, is actually smaller in scale in many of the edges than what is there now. I do not feel like it disrupts or overwhelms the neighborhood. I actually feel like it is very quiet. Very much what was there. Castellet has been a gem. It's modest in scale. It blends in, and I do understand your comment regarding roof and fascia. However, from a pedestrian and vehicular perspective, I believe there is enough variation in plane, and then the drops where it significantly drops from the multiple story down to a 1 story with a railing, for example, on that longest facade. I do feel like there's relief on Emerson as well as in Bryant, with the entry porch along Bryant Street. And then on Emerson, I do want to revisit my comments. I do believe that maybe there is something to be done to that acoustical wall, which is really a small pedestrian scale wall that I believe this applicant could achieve something great in kind of varying that treatment of that wall and just an overall fence. How does it all come together? My comments were related more to even something that could go to a subcommittee. Sometimes we approve projects where there are small things that come back to a subcommittee that are at the level of a fence detail, or something that has changed. And I want to go back to Board Member Osma's comments in terms of the materiality does, for me, also seem very compatible to the neighborhood. I feel that the template of materials, and I don't feel strongly about the roof being overwhelming or too much. I believe that the template of materials and the fact that it is varied on what is existing and historic is very positive. And so it's something that I just wanted to revisit, and I'd love to hear it from other board members.
I think this is great, Osmo, that we're having this discussion. This is exactly what the ARB should be looking at. I fundamentally disagree with you that the roof is just okay at the height it is. I think you're correct. The massing of this building is fine. It easily masses in with the rest of the neighborhood. The materials are becoming really quite wonderful. It's going to be great. There's a lot of thought, a lot of things fitting together. But to me, it's just the continuous sort of warm contemporary style and the continuous flat roof doesn't work. What does everybody else think, though? Do we have any more discussions? This is the crux of the matter, I think.
I can jump in, or actually, why don't you jump in, Alex, and I can jump in after you. We can't hear you though.
Feel free to leave your microphones on and talk.
Still can't hear Alex. Okay, maybe I'll go really quick while he's working on his microphone. I will, after hearing everybody's perspectives, I would say that I agree mostly with Board Member Lee. I think that the massing was responded to. I don't know about pitched or slanting roofs. I don't know that that's appropriate for this building at all. In terms of massing, I think the applicant appropriately responded to what we asked for. And I do think that the small scale articulation, I don't see a problem with that across the length of the street, because it does actually change. It's not the same thing the whole way. Like if you look at the Kellogg elevation, they haven't, the design isn't stamped across the whole way. There are modulations and changes across the whole facade. Maybe there's an opportunity for a little roof break, but honestly, I can make the finding with the design as it is, with the materials as chosen, assuming that the green tile works, which I think it probably will, but I would still like to see it. So I would say I would disagree with the notion that the massing needs to change. Alex, is your microphone working now?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I am, historically I've been, have voted no on projects that have very long facades, even if they had a lot of modulation and articulation. And so I've looked at those buildings now that they've been completed, right? And I still feel the same way about most of those, especially when they're like over 350 feet, to 400 feet. So like 195 Page Mill Road, or 195 Page Mill Road, which is on Park Boulevard. I think is a really good example. But where it really just doesn't really fit in very well with the neighborhood, despite all the best intentions. So I'm always looking for like more variation in visual breaks, and it doesn't have to be a complete break in the building. So I think I'm in the middle between from what I've heard from the other board members. I'm sort of right in the middle of trying to figure out if it's compatible or not. And I really need to see the landscape with the buildings. It doesn't have to be in perspective. I can read plans. But say for example, like many of the large houses in Old Palo Alto have hedges right at the back of the sidewalk. And you really don't see very much of the buildings at all. And that could be the case in this particular project or not. I haven't really seen much. We've just seen little flashes of perspectives in the presentations, but nothing is in the packet. So I really can't make any determination whatsoever based on the very limited information that we have.
Well, that leaves me. I don't agree that we should try to look more like the neighborhood. My feeling is just kind of the opposite. We should look more like a school, which it is. Only in terms of the massing, The breakdown in scale in the new one-story kind of piece that disconnects the area that the part of the building that is on Bryant Street, really kind of around the corner, doesn't do enough for me. Again, I really feel it's something else could happen in the middle of the building. Something different happens one end to the other quite well with a module of kind of a 12-foot height glazed areas and the interrupted line that happens in the middle. The overhang that happens at the top of both ends is really rather successful, but where it falls apart is in the middle, in my opinion. And there should be something, I think, that connects you to the middle of the campus, in the middle of the building here, which would change the scale and break up the kind of monotony of the rest of the at least 250 or 300 feet to the left of the one-story building. I'm looking at that sort of that elevation right now. And I just think that's a missing element. Some piece of the building that just says, here you are, you know, there's something that's happening beyond this wall, beyond this modulated wall, that's really significant on the inside. And it breaks up that volume, breaks the volume to create an entry point. I think the modern idiom here is pretty good. I like the casualness of the way the windows can flow along the outside based on functionality. But I think you could change that with an element in the middle that would connect through to the center. None of my fellow board members here agree with this, but I would love to see it tried in some way. That you would then have a kind of a major piece happening in kind of the middle of the building that made you realize that you're entering there into something that is really kind of the middle of the building. It's a very casual kind of entry on Bryant Street, and then it casually comes around and connects in with that recess. And I don't think that's effective, or I don't think it's. I think you could go back up to the full height somehow with one element and break up the middle of the rest of the building here and have a better formal relationship as a project. And that would be enough for me, because I think the rest of the idioms are fine, except material-wise, I kind of like the original piece, the original elevation, with that being quite a different piece of a balcony element there. I don't quite know why it couldn't come a little bit further forward even, as a relate to the one next to it. We create a real outdoor balcony for use from the inside. Why isn't that really more than just sort of a visual planted area? Why isn't there a real space where you can use it as a balcony? So in sum, I think that I would like to see, I don't think any other board member agrees with me, but I'd like to see something that happens that really breaks the volume in the middle. To me, that's important. But as to the linearity and the casualness of the way in which the windows actually follow the function of the inside somehow, I think that's quite successful. Especially from the middle of the building to the far left side. From kind of the middle of the building through to the corner of Emerson.
Thanks, David. I'd like to, I think what I'm hearing is that there's not a whole lot of support for my comment about the roofs changing. I can appreciate that. And I hear a strong sense that the material selections themselves seem to be going in the right direction. And then I don't hear much support for David's idea of breaking the buildings completely for a second entrance along Kellogg. If I'm misstating that and anyone else thinks that's really a positive change that we should push for, I should hear that, because otherwise, what I am hearing is some consensus, that middle ground, that maybe some more changes to the Kellogg elevation could be helpful. Alex, you stated you thought you were in the middle. Are you able to perhaps put words to that? I want to be sure we give the applicant good feedback that as a board we can support, so we don't redo this discussion again. Grace and Ozma seem happy with it the way it is, more or less. But Alex, how would you counsel the applicant to make changes that might get them through, do you think? Can you answer that?
Well, I would say, I think in my mind that the amount of change that happened between this meeting and the last meeting, I think it needs, in my mind, it needs one more level of change, like that increment of change. And for me, it could be in the roof as well. Although I think, Peter, I think that part of their issue is the height limit. But I would support modifying the overhang and fascia to provide variation.
So
yeah, but I don't think that
fascia perhaps
is different than Ozma's or Grace's. It's just that I think is really important. Like, to me, it's really the breaking up along the facade is really critical.
Should there be another break in the second story of the building, the way they added one someplace down the line, sort of halfway what David is suggesting? Basically.
I don't want to level of detail. Like, it could just be a material. It may just be a material change or change in plane. Adding, like, I don't know what they're doing about public artwork, but there could be some sort of, visual element that provides a break in the facade.
May I jump in?
Sure, of course, please don't ask.
So I do think, it sounds like I can kind of understand breaking up the facade a little bit more. I agree with Board Member Liu's comment that maybe the level of change that happened between now and then could happen between now and the next meeting. For David's comment on connecting to this, like in the center, I could see myself supporting that if it was done well. I can kind of see how that might break up the facade. I don't know if there's a security issue necessarily about controlling entrances and exits along the school, but I can see, I think, one thing when I'm looking at the updated Kellogg elevation is just that it doesn't have a lot of connectivity, right? It's just kind of a wall, that's kind of has windows, but there's no actual pedestrian in and out, it seems, on the Kellogg side. So I can see adding that somewhere. I think but Board Member Liu's comment about adding public art or something a bit more visual interest, there is currently in the updated Kellogg elevation, there is one part of the elevation that is just the shingle wall that goes all the way up, and that could potentially become really blank and really difficult to look at. I would encourage the applicant, the choice of the green tile is good. Maybe, given that we are using the historic doors, repurposing the historic doors that has an even smaller level of detail, I might encourage the applicant to choose a tile that has an even finer detail than the one that we've seen so far, just to sort of keep with that. And I think it would also add more visual interest along Kellogg. So in summary, I think I could support massing changes to break it up, along with David's comment to, put something in the middle. like Board Member Liu, I don't really want to dictate exactly where that shift goes, but perhaps another change would be preferable and more visually interesting on this facade.
Can we bring the architect on board here to get their opinion of what they might suggest even? I know it just extends this discussion, but it's so important that we give them clear feedback. Vin, is it possible for the project architect to come on board and comment on what he's heard?
What's his name?
Adam is available right here.
Yeah.
He's unmuted.
Said to my colleagues, I think that'd be a good idea to have Adam respond to our concerns about the elevation along Kellogg Street. Along the lines of, is it possible to make another round of changes similar in magnitude to what you just did?
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Just want to make sure that.
We can hear you fine. Yeah. This is a very informal conversation at this point, so I'd really like to just hear what you think.
Well, as an architect, as you know, these are the conversations you live for when you get a chance to talk about when you get a chance to talk about a design that you've been working on for years and taking all the input and putting it out for others to digest and also respond to. And I will note, make better. And I think maybe specifically to touch on, Alex, what you said, I appreciate that. And also about how we have made these changes since the last meeting. And I think that they're appropriate and have really tried to respond to the committee's requests. About the Kellogg Street elevation, it has always been in our design intent that the elevational strategy of this building is the fabric, and it wraps this campus in a very, I'm going to say, appropriate language, right? It's not a figural elevational strategy. We're not trying to create figure along that elevation, especially behind that incredibly mature, those trees that line, those beautiful trees that really set the character of Kellogg. So it's a quieter elevational approach, which I think might be interpreted as lacking figure. And that's exactly what we've been trying to do from the very beginning, is to create something we think that modulates daylight in a way that creates interest, beauty, applying a material palette that is warm, that will age really nicely, we think, and won't have to be painted every year, but something that has a natural experience that reflects the neighborhood as well as historic resources on the campus. And that fabric that elevational fabric is really about modulating a few things. It's about trying to bring great daylight into these teaching spaces for students and faculty. It's about bringing air, and I appreciate some of the comments about natural ventilation. I think, I remember Hirsch, you were bringing that up, and I just want to let everybody know we are focused on all of these windows being operable to help allow control.
Adam, we're trying to have a discussion about what we were talking about, which is the massing and potential modulation and potential changes. So I don't want you to spin us on what's good about the building. We can see that, but we have a very finite amount of time we can put into this. Can you help us with that discussion, please?
Absolutely. I think,
by the way, I'd like to hear what you, as the direction you're going, I think we'll get there eventually. Personally, I think I'd like to hear it out, because it is, after all, your design, and we're talking about it. So,
okay, keep going.
To the extent that you can maybe abbreviate it somewhat, that's fine. But I like the expression.
I'll try to go point by point. I think raising the building is something that we don't feel comfortable about. We're trying to keep the elevation low to respect the neighborhood.
Thank you.
I think creating another entrance along Kellogg in an effort to break up the elevation provides challenges to security. And also, I think we're trying to create a hierarchy of entrances. I think the Bryant Street elevation is the entrance. We want to focus visitors around that, and creating a larger, more celebrated one. We're not that comfortable with. I think we feel the one on Bryant is most appropriate. Adding pitched roofs to us just doesn't feel appropriate to the architectural character and style. The roofs here are about creating energy, and I think we have photovoltaics up there, and we're trying to hide them and reduce the impact of those photovoltaics on the neighborhood. We think a flat roof that conceals those things appropriately gives the school the most flexibility around that, right? Creating more porosity through to the center of the campus, that's going to start to really put some pressure on the acoustics, and that is why that wall is very important. And so we feel it actually is doing exactly what it needs to do. And creating more breaks actually breaks up the interior functions of the building. There's a flow that the school wants, right? Between the middle school, between the science, between the high school. And students move through those in a very, very, very carefully choreographed way. If we start punching holes through that wall, just to create porosity, we start to break that flow. There's an interior life to this campus that ties into education and experience of education, how they want to deliver education. So that continuity is very, very important to the school. And that reflects obviously in how we're bringing daylight in, which we've spent a lot of time talking about. I'll pause right there, Peter, if there's anything else you think I've missed.
Well, I think you're making very good points. Those are quite legitimate, what you're saying. And I think all of us sense that some of these things are a bigger deal than we want to push on. You haven't really said, well, this is what I can do to address what seems to be a majority of the board's concern, that the facade is just too long at the same massing scale. And what can you do? Is there some sort of modulation or change with materials, or a little bit of height change you can do to break some of it up? Something. Is there anything else you can think of? I know you got to think about this more, but
yeah, it's something to really. This is not a small question, and so it's something to think about. But I will say this: I thought the comments from Member Lee about bringing more craft. I think Ozma, you were saying the same thing, in color and detail to the ground level. That first floor where people are walking by is going to help break up. I think where there's been a lot of comments about the massiveness or the imposing nature of this elevation, which we don't feel at all, by the way. But I think bringing more material and color could help. But it's something in terms of we can study a little bit more. Is there anything else we can do to try to help reduce that impact along there? But those are things I think that are very appropriate and we'd love to study.
Okay, thank you, Adam. That's all for Adam. Thank you, Vin. You can turn him off again so we can keep with the board here. Do we have any comments from the board? We need to give some conclusion to this, where we want them to go. Are we satisfied with his comments about not being able to put additional breaks in the building?
Thank you, Peter, for just allowing the applicant to respond and to be productive. I really appreciated applicant's comments just in terms of understanding the constraints and just what would be sacrificed and some of the motivations behind decisions. I am wondering, since our role here is really to give comments and continue to early November, and there is some disagreement, and that I think that our comments they've taken note, and we spent 3 hours, and I feel like we should move forward and allow the applicant to digest those comments. Asking the applicant to kind of respond on the spot is asking a lot, and I think we should move on.
Okay, everybody else feel the same? Alex, you're nodding your head. Yeah. Okay, I've heard in addition to this issue of massing that we've talked a lot about, I've heard real concern from almost everybody regarding the Emerson Street fencing set of details and stuff, and we just want to see more information about that. David had brought up 2 items I want to be sure we're not trying to push further on. One is regarding the connection from the parking garage into the campus, whether we should push them harder to change that. And I don't hear a lot of appetite, David, from anybody else about that issue. It's not that I don't think it has merit, but that's secondary to my concerns. And then,
well, I think that, may I speak to that a little bit, because take a close look at the actual elevator staircase coming up and what it does to the space that connects the campus to the playing field, the ultimate playing field there. It's a fairly wide open space now, but it's going to be a very constricted kind of area there. I guess I could live with it, but in terms of that connection, it's the only open connection in the whole campus right now through to the space. And one gets a sense that if it were connected through to the court, to the center circle area somehow, not to the center of the circle, but to the perimeter there, it would remain then open to the field, and it's possible you could have it a gallery connection, art, whatever, skylights through it, but it would stay as an open kind of, this is a big school now, you know, it's getting to be a bigger school. And a lot of people will be, you know, moving through that area to the playing field, not just for the people who will be using it as a sports field, but there really is some form of actual connection where people will use that open field as a play area. So it needs to be kept as open as possible for a larger population of a 500 plus student school. So I think that's worth looking at in a bit more detail in order to see if there's alternatives to the area where the staircase is right now.
Okay, I think, David, that comment has been noted. They've heard it. I just don't know if we have enough support on the board to push more firmly for something like that right now. It's a big change for them. The other comment you've made repeatedly is regarding the concerns about daylighting in the basement. I think, at least I feel that they've addressed the daylighting pretty well. Those are going to be pretty nicely made spaces, and I think it's going to work. Does anybody else on the board share David's concerns regarding the basement lighting strategies? No,
I do not. I agree that those spaces will probably be adequately lit.
So, David, I just want to be sure we're all talking about what everybody thinks. But
there's a kind of a lighting diagram and in the set, and what it shows is that, you know, the amount of lighting that you have into that basement area is pretty limited. It's a daylight analysis plan. It's very extensive, of course, on the upper level, but it is limited sort of to the corners where there's a grate and just a few areas, but there's an awful lot of classrooms that don't have any light, and there's just a tremendous number of spaces that are completely submerged here. The whole Emerson end of the building has almost no natural light. The whole actually Bryant end of the building, except for one side that has clear story outside windows, has next to no light for a whole lot of classrooms there.
okay, I've heard your arguments, David. I appreciate what you're saying, and that's not untrue. It's a matter of weighing, I think, the various factors involved. Amy French, have we provided, do you think, sufficient feedback for staff and the applicant?
I do think that's true, that you've collectively expressed your thoughts and suggestions. And I don't know that I can summarize them. I think you were trying to do that just now, and you got two things that were consensus, the Kellogg massing having some variation there, and the Emerson fencing. Of course, we want to see the conformed plans with landscaping and maybe some enhanced or enlarged landscape details, especially along the right-of-ways on all three of the streets, you know, where the changes are occurring. We definitely need a motion to continue. It does not have to be to a date certain. It can be to a date uncertain. Yeah.
Okay, then I will move that we continue this to a date uncertain. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, made and seconded. Any other comments? If not, can we have a roll call vote, please, Sin?
Yes. Chair Balte?
Aye, yes.
Board Member Hirsch?
Yes.
Board Member Lee?
Yes.
Board Member Liu?
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson?
Aye.
The motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for indulging me. I know I seem to go on and on with this discussion. And, it's very hard remotely, I get it. But
we all do.
It's so hard on the architects not knowing where to go. And I want to be sure we give them and staff good feedback on it. Let's just race through the rest of this and be done. And the next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. We have the Architecture Review Board meetings agenda from August 20th, 2020. Any comments on those minutes? If not, can
I have
Okay, go ahead, Alex.
Okay, I have two comments. Okay, so on packet page 73, Catherine Garber was speaking, and the minutes say Capper, and it should be Cowper, C-O-W-P-E-R.
Thank you, Alex.
And the second one is on package page 77. Sonali Singh had mentioned a Instagram account, which is Bipo Casti. And so it's a acronym for Black Indigenous People of Color at Castellea. So it's spelled BIPOCATCASTI. And that's it.
Would you care, Alex, to make a motion for us, including your comments?
Sure, I will move that we approve the minutes for, what's the date of the?
August
20th. What's the date?
August 20th.
August 20th, 2020, with those two corrections.
I will second that. Can we have a vote, please, Vin?
Chair Bolte,
Aye.
Board Member Hirsch,
Aye.
Board Member Lee,
Aye.
Board Member Liu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson.
Aye.
The motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is board member questions, comments, or announcements. Alex, do we have any progress on the North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan project?
Sure. So the next meeting is going to be next week on Thursday, October 8th at 5:30. There is also projects that are happening in the plan area, and those are going to go to council for pre-screening. So one is like a target at the Fry's building at 340 Portage. There's also a mixed-use project at 2951 El Camino, which is a 5-story building, and that's also going to council, and they're looking to use the new planned community zone for housing. And so that is it's coming to the council soon. I apologize, I don't have here. I think that's on October 5th, so that's next Monday.
What am I missing, Alex? Are those related to the coordinated plan that you guys are working on?
Well, so because they're using so the council resurrected the planned community zone for housing. So it would use, so the PC sort of circumvents our regular zoning, and then the plan, North Ventura plan, has not been adopted or finished.
Right.
So these would be happening, well, they haven't been submitted yet, right? They're just going for pre-screening. So, but in theory, they may happen before.
Is this doing an end run around the work of your committee then over there?
Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think they've been following us all along. So you could consider it an end run, or you could say that they're taking they've been following it and trying to understand the spirit of the law or spirit of the plan. And it doesn't necessarily preclude future projects from happening elsewhere on the site. So, but you guys might want to pay attention to the council meeting next Monday. I don't know, I forgot if we've mentioned this before, but there's also a new housing project proposed across the street on Stanford lands. So, and that's not in the plan area. And that would also use the planned community zoning for housing.
Thanks, Alex. Lastly, I was hoping that either Ozma or David could just give us a heads up on next meeting is regarding the objective design standards for the zoning code. Is there anything in particular we should be doing to prepare ourselves for that meeting?
So Peter, if you don't mind, I can give an intro to this and let Ozma and David take it from there.
Okay, let's keep the whole thing in less than 5 minutes though, because
Yep, I have some slides prepared. Let's see if I can share this. Okay. So here we go. Are you seeing the whole?
I can see it. Okay. Yeah, it's good.
Here we go. So just, we all know that given the changes in the state law, we are working to strengthen our design standards to be objective standards. So we have had a few public hearings with the ARB and the PTC. We also, staff's been working with the subcommittee, being Board Member Thompson and Board Member Hirsch. We've met with them several times over the summer to go over some draft standards. We have built a website, and I have a short URL here so that you can easily get to that website. On the website, we currently have the list of guidelines to transform. So those are the existing design criteria that we're looking to transform from being subjective to objective. We hope to have out the draft new standards by early next week so that you have an extra minute to look at those. And then of course the staff report, comes out the week before the hearing because this will be discussed at our next hearing on the 15th. So we're just doing announcements today. From the subcommittee, they had suggested several topics that the full board may want to discuss further. And so those could be things that you research ahead of time. Those being base, middle, and top, that whole idea. Alex, earlier in the hearing, it talked about facade length. So that's something to think about. Also, height transitions, when a new building is next to R1 single family or anything else, what do we want those transitions to look like? There's also articulation and massing strategies. How would we maintain a nice massing? And then materials. How do we want to regulate those or not would be the question. And so with that, I'll let just if there's other announcements, but we haven't agendized this for discussion necessarily.
You're muted, Peter. Peter, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry, going on and on. The question is just how can we prepare for this meeting, not to discuss the topic itself. Ozma or David, do you have any other suggestions how we could prepare for this?
Ozma, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I think Jody outlined the big ones that have been major points of discussion when we've met separately. I would familiarize yourself with the findings that we have now and really kind of ask yourself if you feel like the objective version of that sticks true to the intent. And I think that's the main thing. It's also a lot of work. It's a lot of stuff to do. So I would set aside, like a Saturday or something, just like a full day. Give yourself some breaks, maybe spread it out over 2 days. Just because it's a lot to go through, and I think also it's a tricky question. There's a lot of stuff in our codes right now that are very subjective, and making them objective is a tricky thing just because they are subjective. So it'll be a good, I think, just fair warning when you prepare for this, just give yourself a lot of time and then really kind of, I think there's a separate document. I think the document that Jody is going to direct us to has, it references another document with the text that is the current subjective standards. So just know that you're going to have to flip between those.
Thanks, Ozma.
I want to make a few comments. I wrote a kind of a summary letter. And my sense was that there are some areas that are being described somewhat overly restrictive. We will have to take a look at them to see if the way in which they're described is actually makes sense for the future, where various details are given specific dimensions, and those would be either to meet them or to exceed them in some way. There were questions of how terminology really, how do things described within the format of the zoning, such as strong, compatible, human scale, modulation. I think that there needs to be some form of sort of glossary or definitions where these terms are used, what they mean. There's questions as to who makes a decision as to when there are areas that are questionable, who should make a decision. It's mentioned that the planning director makes a decision. I had suggested that perhaps the planning director and the chairman of the HRB, ARB, meet together to see where items. a lot of you know, there's the general description of what this is all about is it's a two kind of a pronged direction. One of them is that the applicant could use these particular regulations and not ultimately have to come in front of the board itself, us. And so that's a kind of a big question as to how that occurs and whether what is being described by the applicant who would put in something which doesn't come to us, how does that fit in with the context of Palo Alto? There's project reviews have been presented to us. I don't know what that one's about, but the PDC, no, the planning and transportation, PTC. They kind of joined in the discussion. They're very concerned that we are responsible for a lot of the decisions and want to keep it pretty much that way. It's the way I read the minutes of their meeting. They mentioned us a lot in that. And they also mentioned the fact that they thought that there might be other people who kind of historically have been important to both ARB and the design of Palo Alto, Garber, et cetera, who might join in this effort somehow. And I kind of tend to agree with that there are those who have been around a long time and they should have an opportunity to kind of be part of the review, even if they're not officially designated that way. Of course, the idea here is to shorten the time of approval. And so it's a question as to how that is done, and maybe that would be discussed in a little more detail when we get around to it. Because the idea here would be that if it is all objective, then there's no question as to what should be done or could be done so that it shortens the time frame. Which I guess means that
David, can I just wanted your opinion as to how we can prepare. We're starting to verge into stuff that we have to agendize first. So I think that's great feedback. It's great advice, Ozma and David.
Let me finish up here. And there's some just minor editing of all of the aspects of it, and some of it may require some revision. And I noted some areas where simply technically the diagrams are not appropriate, but Ozma's list I think does deal with many of these. But there's a very interesting issue here, and that is that, you know, there's this question of what is the height limitation, because I think that's going to be a part of all of this now. So as these projects come forward, clearly they're going to need to be taller to be useful. So the question of how that fits in with the timing of all of this is a question that we'll have to consider.
Yes, and so I do want to be clear that we're not looking to, change development standards, things of that nature. We're looking to make the existing criteria that we have that's loaded up on the website, we're looking to make that objective. And so, and as Osma said, ultimately, when you get that second document, you'll have kind of the old standards and the new standards. You'll want to have them kind of side by side so you can look at them and see what it used to be and what's, sort of drafted right now. And also to keep in mind that in the new standards, we're creating an intent statement, kind of generally where we want projects to go as far as massing and facades and things like that. And then we build the objective standards underneath that. And we had talked earlier that we're kind of creating this medium-sized box where most projects can hopefully fit into those objective standards, not all projects. But then if a project cannot fit into the standards, then they have the option of adhering to the intent statement and having the ARB review that to ensure that they adhere to that intent statement. So there is, options for how people can go with the objective standards or, talk to the ARB and have a more discretionary process. So that's the framework of how we're trying to build this so that there are lots of options.
Yep.
Peter, you're muted. Peter?
Still muted. Still can't hear you.
Me?
Nope.
No,
Peter.
Peter's trying to talk. We can see his mouth move, but we can't hear any words.
Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.
Yay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you on the 15th, and I'll send you some emails with information before then.
Thanks.
Take care.